Oh my god. Completely out of nowhere. We started streaming. Nice. So, I think I need to start this. Give it like 4 seconds. And now, Okay. Now, supposedly, I can start this, yeah? Oh, okay. Anyways, here we are. Uh, completely out of nowhere streaming. So that is quite fun. So, yeah. Um, here we are. Nice. Probably this is happening, but well, what matters if somebody notices or not? Uh, this thing I have like 15 minutes that I don't have anything to read because I don't plan to even try to the links for this one. Yeah, I know it. Anyways, so I okay. I guess at the very least I will try. So, so that will be the least I will do. So what's up with my PC? Why is it kind of what's up with that? I don't know. But anyways, yeah. Does it work properly? Is everything going fine? It's volume okay? It's everything. It's proper place. I don't think so. No? Let me. It seems so far, yeah. We also have this. Okay, we have this. It shouldn't be lacking anything so far. Um, what? No, I am not. No, I am not. Gay, but yeah, welcome, Susana. Good, good, good night. I don't know. I could see it. You can see it on screen. I don't know what happened there. Good question. Why didn't work? But we can see it on screen. I don't I don't really have a proper explanation as to why it didn't work today. But yeah, um, welcome. I hope that you are doing. Let me see. I shall be preparing. I think. Yeah, there it is. There it is. You can see that it appears, but I don't know why. I guess I will refresh also because I can't see it on my end. I only can see it on chat on the stream itself, chat, not on mine. But anyway, there it is. Also, I think I changed the position of my microphone or something. It sounds quite different. No, not that it sounds different. I feel like it isn't as loud as it is. Okay, there it is, yeah. I changed the position, sorry. I, I don't realize that stuff that much. I don't really pay that much attention to it. I mean, I change constantly the position itself of the microphone. That's why I don't realize when it is quite weird or so. But it doesn't really matter. Um, you studied psychology today? Oh, it's nice, very good. Very, very entertaining then. Because that is literally what we're going to do today. Not about sex, this is about social psychology. I think there hasn't been any particular, yeah, there has been no class related to sex so far. I don't think there will be, taking into account how little classes we have left. Let me see. There it is. Yeah, we have two more classes after this one. So supposedly there is no talk about sex and intercourse and anything like that. But I don't mean I will say I can picture why at the very same time I don't. I might believe it could be because Well, I mean, it is about all psychology, so I don't really get why not. Maybe because it is too derivative? Not derivative, too secondary? More like, yeah, more outer, not the word. In English, I guess, I don't know why it isn't on the introduction course or whatever, but yeah, the important thing is it is still psychology, so I I guess it will be quite understandable so far. I don't know, I don't know. Um, yeah, I haven't really done things, so let me try to write some suffix. What is suffix? Sorry for the question, but what is? I will have to Google this word suffix. Okay. Allow me to learn a little bit. Suffix. Understandable. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I mean, at the very same time, I think it is quite explained, no? Uh, I remember. I didn't really see that much about only. Yeah, on psychology, I did. Sorry. On psychology itself, I didn't analyze yet anything. There's certain motivation, as you mentioned, but what I saw was on the neurobiological level why it does happen, and there it was talk about why people have those type of motivations, and that's when it was. No, I was explaining something. No, uh, I guess I will have to shut up for like 1 minute and a half or something like that. I don't know. Also, is this working properly? Let me see. Yeah, it should be working, no? Yeah, okay, there it is. Uh, nice. 7 minutes already. I haven't done anything yet. I like to mention that it literally means nothing. But anyways, something like that, I guess. Since when do we have three of them? Three of what? Are you here, Sona? Welcome back. But three ads or 3 minutes? I don't have 3 minutes of ad. What are you talking about? I have like 1 minute and a half or something like that. Not that many. Um, but welcome. Ah, yeah, yeah. I was saying in my classes we didn't see anything particularly on the psychology level yet, but we saw about neurobiology, and it was quite interesting because um, it related to also explanations about why even in what you mentioned there, Sapphic people can find themselves interested in those types, yeah, in those types of uh, motivations, I guess it is called. And yeah, it was quite interesting. I think I can drop it because yeah, I talk as if it was a course that I saw on my own school. No, it was something that I watched on YouTube. Let me see if I can find it. It was from a very popular uh, course. Um, uh, intercourse. Something. See. What is human? Okay, here it is. 15th and 16th. Those two are the. Let me go. This. There it is. From there it is that you can watch what I literally also saw. I think it is quite interesting because it also has a lot of explanations for what you mentioned. Those uh, more. I think they are called here pleasure-driven relationships also. And it ends up being quite, at the very least for me, it was quite useful to learn and to make the whole diagram of understanding solid, let's say. Because after all, it has a lot of ideas and it has a lot of different perspectives to take into account. And it also gives us, I suppose, solid evidence for a lot of quote unquote facts. So it ends up being, yet again, nice to take into account. But yeah, that's that's what I saw. I haven't yet seen anything particularly specific on my own psychology classes about, as you said, motivations and sexual behaviors and anything like that. I only saw that yet. I mean, well, maybe a little bit. After all, we are talking in my own school. We are talking about young and all of that, and there is a very high sexuation. I think it is called also. Those are very present and such because that is like integral part of the theories themselves and all of that. But yeah, uh, I hope you enjoyed your classes. I hope you capable of enjoying them. That's the most important. So I want to drink water. So wait a second. Rainbow. What? Ah, yeah. I I am I am sorry. I don't really pay that much attention to such stuff, but yeah, probably. I mean, as somebody who has literally nothing against such people, I guess you could say rainbow, but I don't know. I couldn't make like 1 pixel to say, oh yeah, but I don't know. I don't enjoy the type of exploitation that is made about such topics, because after all, it should be quite implied that you should be capable of understanding them and supporting whoever is it that stands between those perspectives, let's say. Because as long as they are healthy, you literally have no reason to go against them in any way. And in this case, that is yet another way of presenting the same perspective and talking about the same type of situations that do happen in life. And once you make them stand out, it becomes quite, I don't want to say weird, in a sense of what are you doing? No, you are a weirdo. No. It is more like, shouldn't it be accepted as it is normal? Why make it as if it is something yet weird? I mean, in most countries nowadays, supposedly, there is no regulations about anything like that because, after all, they are normal, no? They should be normal, and they should be considered completely, yeah, rational. After all, they are also born because of that, no? But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I think it is interesting nonetheless. But yeah, basically, that's what I can say. Happy Pride Month, basically. That's everything that I had to say to finish saying that one line. Haha. And also, that has been almost already 15 minutes. So amazing. I did a total amount of zero stuff in these 15 minutes besides talking. But yeah, here we are. So, ta-da! Here we are. Hello. Welcome everybody. We we have we're back. We are after like how many days? 2, 3 days? We're back. We have we have finally come. We have finally done some stuff to try and be present today because after all there is no excuse as to why not try to be there, you know? But yeah, what a nice thing to finally get to stream. You I don't know, I usually sleep earlier. I guess yeah. After all, well, in reality it is not that early for me. Oh, the other way, yeah, it is quite early for me, so that's why I end up streaming at these hours. And also, it it shouldn't be that late, right? I don't want to check. Please tell me that you are tell me that you are taking care of yourself, and with that I am happy. But yeah, um, I, I hope this is a good time. Anyways, hello everybody. I am trying to organize my ideas. So, as always, sorry. Hello, people. Hello, lurkers. Hello, watchers. Hello, viewers. Hello, everyone. Hello, and today in particular, thank you for being here, Savannah. Savannah Pure. And yeah, that's what I had to say. So, today we're going to try and do what I failed to do last time because I literally went to sleep, like at at not even the hour mark. I said no, I can't deal with this, and I went to sleep. I was tired, so excuse me for that. I guess. But yeah, today we are going to supposedly try to do the exact same thing. We are going to repeat everything that happened last time, and we are going to act as if that was a completely intentional stream that was only 56 minutes long. Not that I fell asleep almost when I took a break. But yeah, today we're going to, after a little bit, analyze some stuff. Um, and also, yeah. How about night, Savannah? Thank you for here still. But yeah, um, so besides that, because as always, that's going to happen in quite a while. Right now, we don't really have that many stuff going. Um, that much stuff going on. Sorry. Um, it has been. I guess yeah. I can always start with that. No, it has been quite an interesting week. It has been quite a productive week after the last one, in which we had the pleasure of streaming every single day almost, because I didn't have any classes and because I didn't have any responsibilities to pay attention to. Now we get to be here. Um, this one with almost completely going back into the schedule that is all of that stuff that is getting educated and such. Um, it was quite interesting and quite beautiful, let's say, because after all, it always is a rewarding process when you pay attention to what is being taught to you, and even more at the very least, in my case, what ends up being given as a knowledge is being lectured in ways in which you can sense that the people who are doing those lectures have very, very high energies and very high levels of interest in getting you to understand what they are talking about. So you can extract quite a lot of information from them and you can make a lot of sense about what they are talking about, and even more in these cases if you are willing to go and ask them about such stuff. So that's why it ends up being quite a pleasure. And not only that, obviously, also it has quite a lot to deal with what we always deal about here. And similar, I don't know. I had been reasoning and I had been thinking. I believe it might be quite quite helpful to finish all of that career, I guess. Eh, or not to finish it, probably. To try and get as much as possible content out of it, because it ends up being another tool for us and for what we end up discussing here. And even more. That is certainly something quite nice. One of the most pleasurable parts is to get to have a minimal amount of interchange, the or exchange of words with somebody who knows enough about those topics, because here we can theorize as much as we want between ourselves, and the problem is because we know so few. What we end up doing is we end up talking about stuff as if we really were completely sure about what's going on. Similar. And, it isn't that annoying or that stressful to do it like this. It is just that once you get to talk with somebody who supposedly knows enough about such ideas, you end up getting those responses that are completely formed and that should be capable of fully answering the questions that you are posing. And because of that, now what ends up happening is, at the very least, I feel I get to shorten a lot of the process of learning itself. But yeah, anyways, the point is, all of that happens and all of that feels quite good, and all of that ends up being also, quite obviously, a very, 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 very constructive way to keep learning and such. And I don't know, I believe it always takes takes a little bit of time to get accustomed to them and to get properly in order in terms of understanding that all of this does require some proper analysis and such. So it is just another part of the same coin, no? Just the other side of the same coin, that's the expression. And because of that, nowadays we end up having a lot more to deal with, and a lot, yeah, in general, a deeper comprehension of a lot of these topics, even if they themselves don't seem that logical to somebody out there, let's say, no? But I don't know, I don't think this is in any particular way. But I am still trying to make sense out of this idea of sometimes we end up talking about overly complicated stuff, and I accept it is annoying and it is quite um, infuriating, at the very least, for my inner self now, to observe that I did talk about stuff so much that had literally no way to be comprehended if you were almost, yeah, if you weren't me, let's say. Because I believe sometimes I use unnecessary ways to go about certain concepts. And obviously, that is partially because I lack enough understanding to properly communicate my ideas on one hand, and on the other, it is because certainly it becomes quite a bliss to get to also talk and discuss and all of that. These different sides and perspectives of the world and such, when we get to, not that we have to deal with myself battling my own, my own, I, even if it sounds weird, my own ideas to get the proper shape out of them instead of just spilling out whichever thing it is that I have created at first inside of my own mind. Yeah, so that's that's nice, I guess. That's quite good. To get to make them even more solid and to get to make them even better and all of that is a pleasurable experience. But so far, I don't see how to avoid any of the annoying parts of this. And I don't know. I don't know. I guess we are going to keep thinking and we are going to keep trying to make it all work with enough patience and with enough also dedication, as they will say. Um, you get to find out how to make even the hardest of the perspectives make sense. And in this case, this is no different. I believe so. So yeah, we're going to analyze that at first. But anyways, that being left aside, a lot of other stuff is also as always going on. So I have been lost as always. It has been 3 days. I had a lot of time to think about stuff and such. And today in particular, I think fiercely, or well, after whatever it is it that I already talked about, I want to move into something along the lines of I was thinking and I was immersed a little bit in observation of this whole perspective of why is it that we use so much of our time commuting and so much of our time moving ourselves from one place to another, and not just this whole idea of yeah we might do it, but rather that we have a lot of we have a lot of interesting stuff and we have a lot of interesting perspectives on why is it that happens, but we haven't really found a way to fully, as I hope it sounds logical, automatize all of this because it is quite observable and quite obviously enjoyable when you get to, while commuting, have a good time. And that certainly is not as much talk about. I'll, I mean, I feel weird almost saying it now because it wasn't even on myself an idea that I had present in any particular way for the longest time, and it was quite shocking to discover that I did in fact um, believe in all of that and truly, yeah, truly come to the realization of what I am trying to talk about now. That is, you could have such a good time and such a pleasurable experience commuting that you will notice how commuting stops being a manual task, a manual task, let's say, and it ends up transforming itself into something more on the order of getting to experience out of the pleasure, out of not just moving yourself from place A to B, but also from en- not just engaging, from receiving or doing, or also quite obviously outputting whatever it is that you want to do while commuting. That's where the real fun lies, and how is it that you can get to say or believe that you are experiencing the real joyness out of all that. Because in my case, I didn't even perceive that it was something that you could actually, as I had been saying, enjoy and you will actually find pleasure in doing and almost anticipate as much as you do the act, not the act, the place itself to where you are going. Because that's quite crazy. I mean, you never really get to be conscious or become aware of such things. You end up simply moving from, as I said, no, from one side to the other, letting everything move you around. without you yourself being the one who dictates where is it that you're going and how much of a good time you're having. And that is quite not frustrating, I will say, but rather depressing. Because there is, at the very least, when I see it, there is quite a lot of people who don't even enjoy being out there in the streets because they want to, let's say. And that's where it gets surprising. How would you do something so pleasurable every single day? I, I don't. This is certainly something that I just started to think about. I haven't truly analyzed completely or anything like that. I am just mentioning it a little bit because I haven't found a proper response as to why is it that this thing is so good and so beneficial to everybody in the sense of you can fully enjoy going out as much as you enjoy getting to somewhere in. And I don't know, I believe there is something to learn from that idea. As in, maybe, maybe, perhaps, if you were to spend enough time trying hard enough, you will acquire the capacity of enjoying the process itself, as I said, of commuting. And okay, yeah. This is what I was forgetting to mention. Because there is quite a lot of your life that is getting spent on doing such things, and almost every single human being has to deal with these problems. So if you yourself were to believe that somehow you are an exception to this rule in terms of, although I don't enjoy commuting, I don't have that much of a bad time, what you're probably having is a mildly negative experience that you don't recognize as bad because you have already accustomed yourself so much to the disgusting side of that whole bad experience that everything else seems or feels quite average in the eyes of somebody who doesn't realize that, yes, this isn't that good or that beneficial for you. And I don't know, I, I, I will say probably because what I am going to say right now, I haven't really thought about myself. I think I heard it somewhere. I don't really remember where, but yeah, there was something like a statistic or an approximation made of maybe if people were to enjoy more this, a lot of different percentage will change in life because you will be giving people the possibility of not being so much in pain by moving from place A to B, and by also letting them have a little bit more of an enjoyment on the act itself of, let's say, obtaining the benefits born out of, yeah, this whole perspective and this whole sea of benefits that are hidden behind just, as I say, commuting. You will, in a structural way, move the whole weights towards a place of more comfort. And because you have reached more comfort in society itself, you can ensure, or you can at the very least try to ensure, that this whole thing has now become more meaningful than before. Because the positivity itself, born out of such things, overwhelms the negative sides of such, yeah, such stuff. I believe so. But I don't know. I At the very same time, I haven't really paid that much attention to it or went that deep to observe any of that. I have just, as I said, I realized that like 1 or 2 days ago, and that was a basic thing. Like, wow, it feels so good. In my case, it feels good to ride a bike. Wow, instead of having to use buzz, it feels nice. But I don't know, I guess with enough observation, get to obtain, and you get to, yeah, you get to or make your life easier, basically. And I don't know. I think I think people could make it, not make it, make their lives themselves um, better, basically. So I love that. I I guess that's the point here. Not so much annoyance, not so much problems, but rather yet another perspective on how is it that you might try, you know, try to go on about this whole idea of I wish to have it easier. Maybe there is something that you can work in on that side of your life, but I don't know. I don't know. I haven't yet fully, as I said, I haven't fully seen how that could work. Uh, how to make it consistently better. Let's say so. Yeah. Anyways, besides that, I also yeah. I was I was also saying that something different, which I thought about a little bit this past time, or not this past time, this past week, was it gets to be quite enjoyable, and it gets to be quite an, a pleasure to learn. And we have been talking a lot with a friend about how few you get, yeah, how little you get to learn, and how little you are told that it should be something that you seek out, the experience of learning and such. And I guess only I will say like this, only once you are dealing with the experience itself of learning and you're obtaining all the benefits out of learning you yourself, it is that you end up properly then taking care of yourself in, yeah, in most of those terms and in most of those ways. And I don't know, I am just trying to, in some way or another, make sense out of that, because it wasn't sold like something good. Yet, I guess it sounds weird, but there is. I don't have really another way to say it, sorry. When you're stuffing your brain with informations, the tingles that you feel inside of it are certainly pleasurable. So, it is like if you are eating food, let's say like that. Um, if you can have a good time eating food, and if you can ensure that by eating food you get to survive the rest of your life, it all has a proper perspective and a proper reasoning behind it. In this case, I guess, we don't really consider something like learning that much of a useful thing, because we still carry a lot of ideas pertaining a darker side of life in which learning was an obligation, not something that you really did because you wanted to feel good. So I don't know. I had been trying to reason about it, because one of the goals that I have, let's say, is to properly communicate such an idea and to properly let others understand about such pleasures themselves of life. Because, okay, I think I can say like this. One of the things that is very much related to learning is this whole act of not just learning by itself, but using your time first and foremost on experiencing new things. And because you're experiencing something new, you're adventuring yourself out there. And because you're adventuring yourself out there, you're now also obviously getting to enjoy the thrill born out of something undiscovered for you. In this case, learning is always pretty similar to that, and even more if you can justify it enough for your own self so that every single type of act of learning that you realize seems worth it, you end up with enough time discovering in which parts of of the present you're going not sorry not of the present of the actually available content of this world, in which parts of that you're going to spend the rest of your time, because everything else seems quite not just meaningless but rather annoyingly bad. Because truly, if you wanted to have a good life and if you wanted to have a good yet again existence, you should try to prioritize all of those parts of life themselves, not just to say, I am trying and I am failing at everything, but I am pushing forward still. Rather, it is, or it should try to be something more along the lines of I am, I am getting the pleasure of experiencing the good out of as many things as possible in my day-to-day life. That's why in the whole in the whole zoom of what is my life, I had been dealing or I had been doing pretty well. Because after all, in this case, I am even learning every single day. So I don't know, I think something like that, basically. I, yeah, I had a discussion once and it was quite sad because somebody said, I don't want to learn anymore, or something very similar to that. I can't really paraphrase what happened like 5 months already. But yeah, this person said, I don't want to consume any more information, I don't need it. And reality is maybe, let's suppose that you don't need any more information, but your life itself, in the actual state in which you are experiencing it, doesn't require any more information. What if we are thinking about enjoying an even better type of life? What if we are not just consulting, sorry, what if we are considering driving a fully enjoyable life? Because I don't know, that there is something also that I won't negate. I didn't learn by myself, and I didn't come to this conclusion all by myself yet again. I rather recognize this as something truly comprehensible. That is, you you don't deserve or you don't need to have. You don't deserve what? Yeah. I shot myself with what I said there. Sorry. Sorry. I don't sleep. Maybe, probably. I don't know. Your objective. That's what I wanted to say. Sorry. Your objective shouldn't be to live a life full of enjoyment in which your maximum goal is to find yeah, that's happiness as in something that can be fully had in the whole in the whole life that you live, let's say, or the only thing that you will have for the rest of your existence. Rather, what you should be trying to do is something more along the lines of enjoying a good time and enjoying basically experiences. And when you don't get to do it, when you don't get to enjoy everything, you should be trying to make it seem worth it. And that is also where different values reside and such. Not in the act of forcing everything to go towards the highest level of happiness possible, but rather enjoying everything as it is, or something like that, I guess. It is quite complicated to fully put into words, and even more, as I said, because I haven't fully digested all of that. But yeah, something like that. I don't know. I guess the point is we've fucking worried too much. So yeah. Anyways, let me drink water. Let me do that. Yeah. Let's see. Let me. After that, I will continue with something else. Okay. 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 So continuing with something different. I was I was lately observing and trying to have as much knowledge as possible. And here it is where I found out something quite useful from from a perspective because okay, this is this is something that was introduced in one of the few, not few, in one of the many classes to which I went. And that was, there is this guy who says, or who said in older times, the accumulation of knowledge is nothing but meaningless actions, because certainly what somebody who tries to live or who tries to achieve something minimally good should do is to experience the reality itself instead of trying to arm themselves up and prepare themselves with as much evidence of something, because this ends up driving back to this whole notion of there is no amount of proper preparation that you can do for anything, because you will keep always observing ways in which it might go wrong. That is literally the same thing here. There is no amount of proper, not proper, of enough knowledge that you can hoard, because you can't find it all to be useful, And that's why, in this case, I ended up saying, certainly, this feels quite understandable and this feels quite comprehensible. I was just trying to make sense out of that, and I was just trying to see it for what it was. But in my case, I guess I never really found myself contemplating that from such a point of view. But I believe I enjoy the act of learning more, because what is also necessary for anybody is to accept that things might go wrong. And if you have in your unnecessary amount of action decided that you will not prepare yourself, because you will rather suffer the negative consequences of overstimulating yourself and overdoing it for the sake of just getting, as I, yeah, of just getting to reach that final point and getting to deal with minimal part, yeah, of what you're trying to go for, instead of really fully immersing yourself in what you truly wanted. That's when you end up realizing that preparation is quite necessary. And maybe it isn't about being prepared or not, because I do accept that as such a truth of reality. If you prepare too much, you will end up never doing what you have to, because preparation is the destroyer of plans, as you end up realizing how much more you need to be prepared to deal with anything of that sort. It's so, in this case, at the very least for me, eh, you end up what you end up needing to do, or what you should be trying to do, to at least is realize, get in your hands and materialize this vision. If you get to deal enough with whichever obsession you have, to the point of understanding all the basics of that, that's when you can move fully, because we have a lot of tendencies towards believing that we are ready when we barely have what is necessary. And at the very same time, it is also true what I mentioned before. You will end up never doing what you need to do when you get to, or when you start to prepare yourself more and more. So there is a middle point in which you can, by preparing yourself enough for every single basic part, deal with everything else. Because what gets what gets lost in the process of talking about all of this is a lot of problems of life are not that complicated themselves. They just happen to, let's say, have a negative point of view, because sorry, because all those things just happen to be that way in a lot of different directions. They are not really that deterministic. They are not really that fatal. You just happen to not realize that maybe you needed truly a little bit more of preparation and a little bit more of time to take proper action. That's why it failed. And that's why you also. It sounds bad, but let me say it anyways. You made the wrong decision by believing that you were going to achieve what you desired when you really ignored all of what was the basic part of that. But at the very same time, also, as I said before, it does happen that all of this is comprehensive enough so that once you get to fill the blanks, you can see it pretty much as you make the borders of a puzzle first. Anything else is unnecessary, and anything else is not something that you should, yeah, you should be aspiring to. Anything else is just an extension that you might use if you want to, and if you don't want, you don't even have to look at. By creating the borders themselves, everything falls into place by itself already. So it is only necessary for you to do such a thing because you're literally making your life easier. There is nothing more than that. There is nothing else besides that. There is no ulterior motive, or there is no supposedly higher goal. It is just, you can make it go, and you can be prepared to deal with life itself. But it isn't just, wow, you don't have to be prepared, or you don't have to not be prepared. There is a middle point where enough preparation gives you the capacity to deal with everything. It is like, um, okay, this is not gymnastics. In physical training, there is a certain concept called efficient resting. Once you get to learn about it, and once you get to observe how to properly, therefore obviously efficiently rest, you see how useful it is for you to pursue such things, because it is necessary for you to obtain all of those benefits if you are willing, or if you are intending to reach good places of, once again, physical performance. You know, you are not always in, at the very least for me, in most of those cases, um, you're not always doing badly. You're just obtaining the pleasure of, by doing the exact amount of rest in, well, yeah, let me explain first on physical training. once you get to do enough physical activity, high levels of physical activity, by taking breaks, you also recuperate and rejuvenate enough yourself so that you can keep moving forward as if you had done a lot more than others. Because there is a middle point in which you find a complete homeostasis on your body, and that is what you should be aiming for. In this case, that is the very same thing, but applied to situations and life and actions that you might take when it comes to problems and such, you know. I don't think it is that negative or it is that hard to get. It just happens that we don't really pay attention to any of that. And it just happens that we also avoid all of these realities as if they were something bad, when, once again, they are just parts of being alive. There is no necessity for you to see it as something so bad. I don't know. Anyways, I think I have been talking quite a lot already. So, how much? Almost, yeah, almost an hour. Almost. So, probably we can start with this. Let me drink some water on after that we're starting. And also, something that I don't get. When did I say that we were going to? Okay, I get it. I get it. I get it. I get it. I started a little bit later than what I expected, but I get it. That's why my my whole system of clocks made no sense, because it started at another time, not because anything else. But yeah, let me take a sip, and after that we are really getting into the softy stuff itself. Prepare the video. The video, I already have it. The scene. Here it is. What's up? Okay. Okay, there it is. Is it? Yeah. Okay, there it is. Yeah, now for real. So, let me drink something, and after that, moving on to the proper learning of today. Also, my itches a lot. I don't know. But yeah, anyways. Transition. Here we are. You can see the mouse? No, you can't. No. So we have that. I have to mute the clock. I have to play the desktop audio. And we should be fine, no? Everything should be working properly. Yeah. So, just in case, yeah, everything is going fine so far. So yeah, we are continuing a little bit with our studying sessions and such after, as I said, almost like a week. We are moving on to lecture 22, Social Psychology 1. So yeah, I think I don't really have that much more to add. Let's see. I think it starts around here.
Okay. So up until now, in many ways, we've thought about people as individuals. How they see, how they remember, their personality, things you can measure by IQ tests, if they have psychopathology or not. We've primarily focused on people as sort of individual agents in the world. And for this lecture and for the next lecture, we're going to flip over and think about people as they interact with other people. And here's all the way back from 1962. Here's a sort of an example, and you know so much from your life, but of how powerfully we're influenced by other people and our behaviors. So this is a story of the rules, elevator rules. You guys know elevator rules, right? You get an elevator. What are you supposed to be so you don't make other people uncomfortable, or they don't make you? Yeah, which way you're facing. Not too close in space, right? If there's only two of you and the other person huddles right next to you, you go, right? Okay. Anyway, here we go.
Wow, copyright. Hello, my little friend. Anyways, yeah. So we start very, very simply with, as always, not introduction. I guess in this case here, we would observe a lot of social interactions and such, it it becomes pretty clear when we're talking about such stuff that all of this is very much dictated by the whole society, no? It doesn't happen that you yourself act in certain ways in your society because of things that are completely out of your control. It does happen kind of in the other way that you are acting in a lot of ways because what you are doing is more related to the fact that your actions, let's say, get dictated by the environment itself, and it all is ruled by what you already know that should be the proper way of acting. And in these cases, it isn't in any particular way something negative. It just happens that you very much deserve, I feel so, to learn about this because it conditions you and it affects how you yourself live this life, not something that just happens or that just out of nowhere involves humans as a completeness, but you somehow escape this. No, 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 no. This is once again also including you. So yeah, anyways, continuing because this is this is just the introduction. Like 1 minute and 40. Not that much more to really say, but yeah, basically just a little bit of a clarification, or at the very least, I guess, response as to why we would consider anything of this, probably. So yeah, moving on.
So I was a graduate student in brain and cognitive science, and I got minimally exposed to social psychology. I was actually a teaching assistant. I must have heard something about it. But it wasn't until I was teaching at Stanford, which is full of famous social psychologists, and I was hearing them give their introductory psychology lectures, that I got amazed by what social psychologists have discovered about human nature. And maybe because I was exposed to it in one shot, it really changed, for me personally, how I try to think about people from that day forward. So let's see if that does it for you. Right? And in many ways, we're going to do today the core most famous things in psychology, the Stanford Zimbardo prison experiment, the Milgram obedience experiment. And a theme you'll see is how funny we are as humans and our desire to want to fit in. So what is social psychology? The scientific study of the way in which our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are influenced by the real or imagined presence of other people. So it's how we relate to other people. And to a certain extent, you know, if you compare it to things like linguistics or other aspects of psychology, it seems social things have seemed, you know, weakish. But people have been thinking in the last decade more and more that maybe many things that make humans humans have been pulled by powerful social relations that occur in groups of humans. And so, for example, looking across primate species, just across primates, here's the average size of the social group, here's the average size of the neocortex, and it's a pretty good fit. And so you can think back in the course of examples, for example, the infant who's willing to crawl across a dangerous visual cliff if the mother has a positive facial expression. You know, risking injury or worse because you have a social cue that says it's okay, and you're just an infant interpreting that. So more and more the thought that many of the abilities we have, how we work together, how we communicate together, are driven by our fundamental social character. And so we'll talk today about the power of the situation. This is what's...
Okay, yeah. I believe this is a very good point to stop at because there is a lot of not just things to unpack, also a lot of things to expand upon. We're truly in a point in which you can say certainly that what we're going to analyze is obviously the human nature in terms of its social activity, no? But what also gets to be pointed out, at the very least I feel so, is the pleasure itself found a lot of times in multiple situations that do happen to occur throughout life and that do happen to occur throughout every single one of us existence because they are all related to ways in which we interact with the ambient. And as it was pointed out here, it does happen that a lot of this stuff really seems to be pretty much determined already in certain ways, or it seems to be out of our control in terms of we can really dictate how we are going to react and such. It is quite useful and it is quite interesting because, once again, even the example of a child, not a child, a baby who crawls towards its mother when there is yeah, there is imagery of, not imagery, there is a visual clip in which they can foresee themselves falling because they also don't even have the capacity of realizing that it is a glass what they are observing instead of an image that truly shows them a complete bottom through which they are going to fall. They are just being um, viewers of something that uh, helps them not fall, while at the same time conveying the image that is under that ground, that lets them keep themselves afloat, yeah? But even in those times, you can already start to see how different sparks of sociality happen even in those tiny creatures. That is why, yes, this is quite quite a beautiful thing to consider and quite an interesting thing to take into account because yet again we are pretty much social creatures, and even if you yourself try to say no, I don't need social interactions that much, what you will with enough time realize is if you don't socialize enough, there are different negative consequences to your own life, and what you should be trying to go for throughout enough time is avoid them. Those negative consequences are really impactful in your life. So if you can avoid them, it's going to be quite useful. But yeah, anyways, moving on.
This is the big idea in social psychology, is that people's behavior can be phenomenally altered by the situation they're in. And we'll talk about attribution, how we decide whether a person behaves because a certain way because of their character or the situation they're in. The fundamental attribution error, conformity, compliance, obedience, and bystanders. And I think there's so many experiments here that amaze me and are still completely relevant today, and I'll convince you of that. So a thing we engage in all the time as humans is interpreting the actions and words of others. Why did somebody do something, right? That fills our lives, our families, our teachers, our friends, our coworkers. Why did somebody do something or say something? Why is that person looking at me friendly across the room, right? So the causal attribution, what is driving that person's thoughts? What's in their mind that's making them behave that way? And there's at least two kinds of explanations. One of them is character. So personality psychology is all about that. The character of the person is making them behave that way because they're outgoing or because they're shy or whatever. So Jeremiah helps the elderly person across the street because he's a really nice guy. Sven had a hard time solving the puzzle because he's kind of a dummy, right? So making money to the boy is she nice and generous, right? That's the personality predisposition interpretation. So that's the who she is or he is, or they're behaving that way because they're in a particular situation. So Jeremiah helped the elderly man across the street because his friends are breaking in to the apartment the guy's leaving behind, okay? Or there's another person there, he's trying to impress that person, what a swell guy he is. Sven had a hard time solving the puzzle because it was an impossible puzzle, okay? He didn't get nearly enough sleep, the situation. She gave money to the boy because that, he's a drug dealer, okay? He's a courier running, okay, whatever. It's a situation, okay? So, you pick it, but all of a sudden the interpretation completely changes as to what's going on about character versus situation. So where does the behavior come from? The dispositions of an individual or the situation they're in? Personality psychologists focus on this. Social psychologists focus on this, and they will argue that this dominates everything. This dominates everything. Not the only thing, but it dominates everything. So let's consider then in one other way. So let's say that you are late for an appointment with me. So what do I start to think as I'm sitting there waiting for you, and you don't email me, you don't call me? You might think, well, this person's a bit inconsiderate, a bit disorganized, a bit unmotivated. It would not be a good idea, for example, to show up for a job interview late for your appointment, right? But why? Because we don't want them to think we're disorganized, inconsiderate, or unmotivated, okay, until we're hired. So that's the other person, right? Like, why aren't they here? There's something, they're messing up and there's something not good about their character. But imagine when you're late. Why are you late? Because you're disorganized, inconsiderate, and unmotivated? No, because something came up. Situation, right? The traffic was worse than you could have imagined, right? Last minute, there was an email, that you had to respond to, or your parent called, or whatever. Some situation made you late. And what I'm going to show you in a moment is that a very fundamental thing about people, in fact, called a fundamental attribution error, is that we're biased to interpret the actions of others as revealing their character, whereas we're biased to interpret our own actions as being driven by the situation we're in.
Well, I mean, that was that was pretty much quite a recent point, but yeah, certainly when you get to realize that such things affect your life and that those ways in which you interact with the world are so much affected by your perceptions of you as something that is pretty much more self-centered than what you used to think about. It ends up leading you towards the proper conclusions of, with this in mind, what you have been learning, what you have been now properly getting yourself into, is the discovery of how many times have you judged others based on what is being presented here, basically. You believe that somebody else is doing something bad to you, while you somehow are liberated out of all responsibility because you, not that you truly, as if you were the most evil person, you have no real justification to see yourself as somebody bad. And the problem with all of this is, it is a very good idea to have, yes, and it is a very amazing observation to make, because it does happen that every single human being, to some extent or another, falls onto this fallacy. The, the part that is lacking here is, once you get to realize such things, it now lies in your hand the proper capacity to not be annoyed almost anymore with all of this stuff, because what you get to learn and what you get to, at the very least I believe so, discover is, there are very, very, very right ways in which you have started to judge at you, and you yourself have started to believe that others are truly affecting you while you are affecting nobody. And this is, I believe so, related, or not related. I believe it was also presented like that. It reveals quite a lot of, as humans, we taint the perspective of others while keeping ours completely clean. In this is dif- no different case. What is necessary here is, okay, you're presented with this information, how are you to react to this? Because certainly you're also affected by it. Now, are you going to be capable to not see yourself as somebody so bad or so mean or whatever? Or are you going to believe still that you are always doing good when it comes to making judgments of character in all of these occasions? That is where it lies, the proper discovery and such. Not in, wow, what a useful video, and you close it and you go to sleep as if nothing ever happened. But anyways, I mean, that is more, that is something more along the lines of, if you're even willing to to consider what we are discussing here. So yeah, anyway, continuing, I guess.
So in a lot of this work, Ross was the one who came up with this term, the fundamental attribution error. The other person is driven by character, and that's how we interpret why they do things. We give ourselves a break by the situation. And so what they did is they ran experiments where they wanted to make it incredibly clear to Stanford undergraduate research participants, incredibly clear that the situation was dominant, and showed that even then, even when you know for certain it's a situation, and you know as much as you can possibly know, you tend to ascribe character to people, okay? So they had students run in pairs, and they were truly randomly selected to be a quiz master or a contestant, 2 students at a time. The quiz master, one student comes up with questions, and the contestant has to answer. So they could answer, who were the 2 inventors of calculus? And you know the answer might be, and it's probably, you could argue some things about this, right? But look, you know this as students, it's sort of unfair that we get to ask you the question. So I get to ask you something like, what's the structure just in front of the hippocampus that's important for emotional memory? And you might answer, oh no, oh no. That was on the previous test, it's not cumulative, okay. And I go, it's the amygdala, and I've worked in that field for 30 years, and I feel pretty proud of knowing that little fact, okay? Now, I need a student hand to go up. Okay, now you ask me a question that you think I might struggle on. And believe me, there's an infinite number outside the location of the amygdala. Pick one from physics or math or chemistry. You're going to embarrass me, but make it really hard so I don't look so bad. There's what, sorry? A football match this weekend in England. Manchester. No. Okay, I just made that up. Okay. No, I don't know. No, here's the point. If I ask questions, I know the answer. I picked the question, right? And you may or may not know it. If you create the question, there's a pretty good chance I won't know it, right? Okay, so inherently, when somebody is the quiz master, they're going to know the answer, and the other person may or may not know it. Pretty good chance they don't, as they make up questions. You know that, right? Logically, you know that. So the setup with And the students were only correct 40% of the time, not bad, who were answering the questions spontaneously made up by the randomly selected quizmaster. So does this experiment, knowing this, does it tell you anything about the knowledge or intelligence, let's call it just an easy label, of the person asking the questions or the person answering the questions? No, right? Does that make sense? They were randomly put into positions where one person gets to ask and one answer. Yet, even seeing all this right in front of them, then students were asked, compared to the person in general, to the average student, are the people up there, the quizzer and the receiver, are they less knowledgeable, about average, or more knowledgeable than the average other Stanford student? And in a pure scientific sense, you should say, I have no idea, because you created a situation where one person had a hopeless advantage compared to the other one, right? You told me you were doing that, I saw you do that. But human beings can't help but say, including the contestant says, I guess I'm a bit dumb, but that other person was really smart, the one who knew about the soccer match in England, right? And other questions, or the other person observing, that quizmaster seems to know a lot, that student, and this other one, the one who's answering the questions, not quite an average MIT student, okay? All right? Because people can't help but say, if I see behavior, it's because of the content of your character, smarter or dumber in this case. Even though I know, logically, your mind goes to that analysis of behavior in others by their character or disposition. Here's another one.
Okay. It isn't really that hard to pick up apart. You can really make sense out of it. The problem is the different ways in which it applies to your own life are overly complicated because there are a lot of situations in which we as human beings feel the need to clarify what others are and what different people show themselves to be in terms of we truly value making up understandings and judgments about their character as if they were really the most necessary thing to keep living, let's say. In these cases, what tries to be shown at the very least is by doing so, you end up being quite wrong. And by doing so, in a lot of situations in which you literally have no way of knowing anything properly, you just take stances, and that's where this becomes quite important, because this isn't just about saying, wow, I am doing good or I am doing bad, or this one is good, this one is bad, without knowing them. The problem is how you interact with the rest of the world, because now you believe that someone is more capable of stuff and you're interacting with the rest of the world based on judgments that you can't in any way possible prove to others. You can't really let anyone become aware of what you are talking about if you are showing them or giving them stuff that has no way of being confirmed. And that's where it becomes, in these cases, truly an annoying thing, because you have just altered the way in which the whole societal group around you works. That's where this also becomes quite dangerous, because you don't just need to observe all of this. What you have done is you have changed the way in which things are going to go in your life because of a judgment that nobody will ever understand. And even that's also quite a funny thing, because if you start to pay attention to this idea, what you will realize is there are enough occurrences of this same event throughout the time that when you look back into it, you will find out with enough repetition of that, you ended up making yourself look worse than what was really necessary, because you literally are not obliged to judge anything, yet by doing so, you are now altering all of the events that are going to cascade from that. And because you have already taken stances on things that literally nobody will understand but you end up being not only quite wrong, which is quite, I believe so, quite funny, quite interestingly conscious, but also because you truly attribute to those things a level of integrity that they don't have. So I feel so. At the very least, I wouldn't know if where I am talking from is really a place of, oh wow, I have gone through this process of or simply s- talking about it as what truly deserves to be paid attention to. By observing this stuff, you get to learn that all of this is quite useful because the amount of impact that it will have in your life when you have to confront this later on is not going to be that big, and it is not going to be that damaging on you. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Continuing, I guess, after trying to make this point for the last 5 minutes, continuing.
Participants read essays that were in favor of Castro, who was the leader of Cuba, or against Castro in the US, were mostly against Castro. The opinions expressed in essays were presented as either chosen, so the person could choose to speak what they wanted to speak, or they were assigned by the experimenters. So you were asked, please give a pro-Castro speech, or please give an anti-Castro speech. You know, that's your job here. And then the people listening said, okay, what do they really think about Castro? What do they really think? Okay, even in a situation where you're told you're going to be assigned that. So what happens? Here's how much they believe that the person, the essay writer, sorry, was pro-Castro or anti-Castro in the case where they chose what to do. But when they were given the assignment, and now you know it's truly random, it's not quite as much as this, but they still believe that if you write a pro-Castro essay, even though you're told the person was assigned that essay, as you read it, you go, this person seems to really believe it, okay? I think they're really for it because that's their predisposition. You're told fully this is a situation that's assigned, but humans can't help but think, I see through this a little bit, and that essay is just a little too well written, a little too convincing for a person just to be randomly writing it, okay? So it's humans, even when you give them all the information that it's 100% situational, they can't help but interpret things as being built out of character or predisposition in a person. So.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, I think I have a proper response to this because this simply helps what was made on the first point or on the first analysis, and that is certainly you have a tendency towards validating yourself, no? The self-centeredness that always happens on everybody, and the tendency, obviously, towards being subjective. You can't get rid of that. That is literally part of being a human being. You need to believe stuff, and therefore, you keep finding different causes that will justify what you believe, no? So, in this case, what happens is certainly because you see something as good and you see something as bad, you start to believe that something is a certain way in any of the directions, and with enough repetition of that, you end up truly believing that your character judgments are always going to be right, even if these things are in no way true, and even if those things are in no way completely honest. What you have done just now is create an imaginary picture of something completely out of what is true, and at the very least I feel so, what is truly helpful for your own existence. But at the very same time also, I think we haven't truly analyzed why does it happen, because this type of judgments end up making you once again act in certain ways, and most of those times also what I as far as I can remember does happen is you do have a certain tendency towards not seeing it as something so negative. You can truly realize that this does happen in a way and this does happen in a certain direction, but at the very same time, you if you are given enough proofs that this isn't so, you retract your own um, wrongdoings. But yeah, I something like that basically. It requires patience to be fully understood. So yeah, moving on. I guess moving on.
People have also thought that this idea of understanding another person's behavior in terms of the predispositions versus the situation, that the dispositional one is made automatically, reflexively, that the situation information sort of follows in a controlled, slow, thoughtful way that takes energy to correct. That humans on the whole first interpret automatically, reflexively the behavior of others as their character, and then second, optionally, can correct it thinking about the situation. So the idea is you see something, you immediately apply, you decide what the person's character is, and then you're maybe will slowly, effortfully, and consciously think about what the situation is that led to that. So these are automatic, and this is controlled, thoughtful, and deliberative, so it may not happen. And so the people to show this, it's a slightly complicated experiment, but let me show you how they wanted to prove that thinking about the situation demands a lot of extra mental resources to overcome the initial interpretation. So they had participants watch silent video clips. They said it was silent because they wanted to preserve the privacy of the woman who was being videotaped. Having a discussion with a stranger, you just see the woman, and she looks extremely anxious on some clips and not others. The task is we want you to rate how anxious is this person basically. Rate your impression about, in terms of their character, are they an anxious type of person? Some of the research people who were the subjects were told the target was discussing what the topics were. And then they also did one other thing, which is some of the people were asked to just watch and rate, and other people were told, not only do you watch and rate, but we're going to test your memory for the content of what she said. Because of that, they're trying to memorize what they hear, and the idea is that you're filling up their attention with what they're memorizing. They can't make the correction. They're out of mental resources to make the situational correction. So you're watching these films on anxious topics or relaxing topics. You know, the relaxing topics might be these things. Tell me about a foreign film you like or a favorite hobby, or speak about your worst public humiliation, a sexual fantasy you have, a personal failure you had. And of course, these things in red, you could expect a person talking about that to seem more anxious. Those are personal, anxiety-provoking topics, okay? So here's what happens. So again, the topics were either anxiety-provoking or not, and you were either just watching the film or memorizing what you were hearing as well. And the hypothesis is that this would happen. So if you were doing one task and you were aware that, oh, this person, and you were told what the topic is, having a relaxing topic or an anxious topic, you could separate out what the task is versus the person, okay? But if you were trying to memorize simultaneously what the content of the film was, that difference disappears. The rating is identical. The people are not taking into account the topic that's being talked about. Because their mind is not, because they're memorizing, their mind is occupied with the content of the scene, and they're not able to sort of correct the intuitive, automatic, reflexive, habitual interpretation of a person's actions based on their character.
Okay, yeah. It's a little bit as complicated to say this. No? There are a lot of different parts of the brain that engage in different activities. In this case, when you are referring to something related to the act of trying itself to consume information instead of just, in these cases, I feel so, analyzing and observing why is it that somebody does something. If you were to not truly give mind and give even less proper care to what you're doing, what your brain by default goes into is a mode very much called the default typing, which you believe that what you are moving yourself towards is something minimally similar to the unconscious lingering notion of what you needed to do. Reality is obviously you're not going there, you're only moving towards a different direction, and you're probably hindering yourself in the pursuit of something similar. But it isn't really that bad as it is shown here. It simply happens that, once again, there are different parts of the brain acting in these cases. If you haven't realized that in some parts, in some areas, in some situations, what you are doing is consuming information for the need of that and trying to fit every single thing that lies inside of you to see what is true and what is not, and what is being said and what is not being discussed. All of that ends up being bunched up together. Because, once again, you need to pay attention to what's going on, and you need to be capable of judging properly what are the contents themselves. And there is this whole act of I don't want to say that word, categorizing all the things that you're learning. If you don't do it properly, what ends up happening sadly is you don't even remember what you were truly trying to learn about. So it is necessary for you to not engage in an act of judging, because if you're making judgments about what type of information you're inputting to your brain, you're already at that point it's modifying the way in which that information is stored. So it is necessary for you to not engage in such activities. That is why in these cases what we are observing makes much sense, because people who are just searching, as it is shown here, have no necessity of paying attention to the contents themselves. You're already being fed with the idea that something will be good, something will be bad, and that's enough for you to know how to proceed with the judgment itself. Instead, I mean, this is pretty much similar to the idea of, can you watch a whole group of people playing basketball, and after having them play basketball in front of you for how much was it, 1 minute or two, or what? Not in front of you, a video. After that whole time, did you see a monkey? Something that is completely out of the question, out of the picture that you are paying so much attention to, will hardly be computed for most of the people, because it has nothing to deal with the point, and it has nothing to deal with what you were paying attention to. But I don't think it is that negative in a lot of different ways. It just happens that you, as an individual, have to divide your capacities. And obviously, if you are given a goal, at the very least for the big majority of people, no, you try your best to fulfill the role that you were given, because you understand that it is necessary for you to do so, not because you believe that everything else is meaningless, but rather because if somebody tells you that you need to do something, you just fill in the blanks of why such a thing will be good. You have your own motivations, you have also possible um, cons- sections, constitutes, how is it said? Uh, Conniptions as to why something will be good and such, or why they are requesting that is particularly from you and all of that. So you make up ideas about such things. But if, with enough time, you end up discovering also that what you need to do is try your best to find out proper responses and try your best to find out proper analysis to these cases, be it you don't get to enjoy any of that, because normally what you are trying to go for is completely out of your first approach, you will not have that much of a good time, you know? It is, you are specialized in something, even if you are, even if you yourself haven't fully dedicated anything, you are specialized on something already. By your intentions, you are directed towards a goal. So something fully out of that goal is expectedly going to be to look out so differently, like it is shown here. Like, let me try to give an example. Okay, if you are given the task of, can you say to, okay, there is this, we even saw it here. There is this one test in which you are given the a different set of colors and words that appear on screen. What you have to do is say the words out loud or say the color of the words out loud. Now, if we were to also integrate into that, can you say in the exact same order as they appeared the name of the colors that you said exactly as they appeared? Can you do something like that? Can you memorize them? Because what was required from you was, can you just say which one is present at the moment? Adding something completely out of the formula is going to obviously throw you off. You have no way to be prepared for that. You didn't even expect it. That's why you didn't even dedicate any particular resources to memorizing anything of that sort. Who will be at fault? You for not having prepared for an incredibly out of nowhere extra task, or me for saying you or for asking you something like that? And I mean, I say at fault as if somebody was really wrong here. I am just saying it as it seems too much of, wow, the human is so basic. Yeah, kind of, man, kind of. It is something particularly what is going on. It all will depend. It is like if you were to ask the best motorcycle driver in the whole world to drive a shit, are they going to be capable of doing such a thing if they haven't in their whole life boarded one? Are they going to be capable? I don't believe you have the luxury to say, oh my god, this guy is so stupid, he can't learn to do such a thing. You know, I don't know. I don't believe that is a correct judgment. What you're going on with there, but anyways, continuing, I guess.
Interpretation of a person's actions based on their character. So, in the news today, as if it were organized for our course, there's a fantastic debate about what pictures to release or not release from what. Yeah, the killing of Osama bin Laden, a huge debate going on about whether it should be released or not. That's gotten the public attention. One of the biggest reasons why, among several, but a big reason why there's such a huge debate is another set of pictures some years ago from Abu Ghraib prison. I'm going to show you those pictures and the consequences that were felt to follow from their release.
Oh my god! Oh my god!
So this
Oh
is
my
one of
god!
the
Oh my
soldiers
god!
who was there, Private Lindy England, who was said to have participated in maltreating and torturing
my God.
detainees of the Abu Ghraib prison. So, you know, when the United States went into Iraq, they very much had the thought that they were liberating the country from tyranny, which in some sense, everybody agrees, I think just about they were in some sense. But one of the goals was to convince the population of Iraq that the United States was not there to occupy and take over, but to liberate and free the people of Iraq. That was a big message the United States wanted to send to
Please
the world and to the
don't
Iraqis.
show
Right?
water!
Okay,
Don't show
right.
water! Don't
Regardless
show
of whatever
water!
else
Don't
you
show
know,
water! Don't show
or
water!
believe or have political opinion, that was a message the United States wanted to send to everybody. That was huge for them to do. They were there to help free Iraqi citizens, not to occupy and take over Iraq. So imagine when these pictures came out, some of
No.
a very large prison that was run by Americans in Iraq, and these pictures were put on the internet.
Okay.
Of various what looked like and probably were sort of torturous situations. Here's an Iraqi person with this hood on their head with wires connected to the body.
What's that bad?
Here's that soldier holding a leash, and here's a prisoner on the leash. Here's a picture, a smiling picture with her and another soldier. Here's a pyramid of naked prisoners piled up, one on top of the other in a humiliating position. There's another picture of her.
Okay, it is censored. Let's fucking go. Oh.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I fucking sweat there, my brother. Ah, man. Ah, man. I said, oh, well, I saw my whole life flash before my eyes. Holy shit.
And then she was tried in court for these things. It was devastating for the United States. These pictures were devastating for the United States because they were exactly the opposite of the picture the U.S. wanted to present, which is one of liberation and friendliness and democracy and freedom. And here's, tyranny, brutality, and prison torture. And that's what it figures hugely in the mind of people in Washington now as they're debating about these pictures. And for the moment, they decided not to release any picture. The power of these pictures as they floated around to inflame and incite arguments. And so here's two ways you can do it from the viewpoint of social psychology.
Okay, yeah. Before we go to see what the way in which you can do such stuff. It is obviously complex what is being discussed here. We are talking about a whole nation and then the individual actions of somebody who is barely related to it, because let's be honest, what happens most of the time is war itself is a very close environment in which a lot of people get to not enjoy it isn't a playground, but get to exhort themselves in which in ways in which they feel the most attracted to. That's why, in these cases, you will observe such brutality, even from those who should have been acting with good intentions, you know? So, as somebody who's minimally part of your state, are you going to take so much responsibility by what they do? Are you going to say that you are completely under control of them? Once again, something that is not discussed enough here, I believe so, is nations don't, at the very least now, possess the capacity to fully control how you act and how you move in the world, even if they have regulations and such. Because certainly, if that were to be minimally true, we wouldn't even have any um, type of problems. We wouldn't have any um, revolutions. We wouldn't have any type of disarray or anything like that. It all just happens that these people are doing what they feel like doing. You know, not that they are doing what you ordered them to do. There is no way to fully control anybody. And although it is understandable that as a nation you will take a responsibility for their actions because they make you look good, there is also a degree of okay, it is our fault that you don't really have to take in. It is, yeah, it goes beyond just being responsible, and it ends up looking like, oh my god, we are completely at fault. Please excuse us. These people don't take advantage of all of our system. If they were to be really loyal humans to our society, they wouldn't have done that way. You don't really know which situations these people are going through, and neither they feel that much of an attraction towards following your ideals. Once again, a nation is something incredibly complex to picture. Do you really believe that something like this is going to happen on them? I don't think so, but anyways, continuing, I feel like um, moving on to the response itself of what a social psychologist might do, whatever.
Disposition attribution, when you imagine you're a juror where she's being tried. So, the accused knew what she was doing. She was laughing and joking, enjoying, participating all for her own sick humor. So here's a crime. You get angry and you're not very sympathetic because it's from controllable factors. She should have controlled herself. She's held responsible. She should get a severe punishment. Or you could ask, and we'll come back to this at the end of the lecture, nearly on, were there uncontrollable factors well beyond what a person could reasonably be asked to control? Then you're not so angry at them if you think the situation was very problematic. For example, she had a boyfriend who was not only superior to her militarily, but also her was a lingual leader. She was a follower. She was an individual, was smitten. She did whatever he wanted her to do. Somewhat more sympathy. Person not held responsible, and the punishment is more about rehabilitation than punishment. So those would be the two approaches. She was found guilty of 1 count of conspiracy and 4 counts of maltreating detainees, 1 count of committing indecent act. She was acquitted of conspiracy count. So I'm going to come back to this in a little bit after we talk about the Stanford prison experiment and ask you your thoughts about this individual from the information you have. So we'll come back to that a little bit, thinking again about what is a person responsible for versus the situation. So let's start to talk about social influence, which is, again, a change in a person's behavior or beliefs in response to the intentional.
Yeah. I believe there wasn't really a proper response to what was just shown there. I guess, yeah, it will be understandable to not do it. I feel so at the very least. After all, you wouldn't want to politically influence that much your students, but trying to be honest here, there is a very good way to understand things, also to make it seem more easy to solve than what it was finished as. All of these people have a lot of ways to act. If you understand that you don't possess as many tools to change their actions as you believe you do, in these cases, as I mentioned before, you will realize that they are really out of your control and that they really do whatever they want to do. You don't get to alter anybody to those levels of action. If they did those things, it is now in your hands the necessity of interrogating them as to why they did it. But to try and excuse them so much without their own explanation. You are rather taking up a role that isn't yours, and you're becoming somebody over worried and things out of the proper order of attention that you should be trying to follow. I don't. I don't see it as the most negative thing that could ever happen. It is just a natural consequence of trying in any way to properly deal with these problems that you learn. Well, I don't. I don't deal that much with these things. I just happen to find out that, I am taking a stance. What I should be doing is just comprehending and nothing else. But yeah, anyways, continuing. I don't know. I don't know. It feels once again politics entering into my study. Get the fuck out.
Or unintentional influences of others. And we'll talk about three kinds. Conformity, which is changing your behavior or beliefs in response to explicit or implicit pressure from others. That's the person turning in the elevator. Compliance, changing one's behavior to avoid conflict. And obedience, which is following the demands of more powerful people or organizations. So conformity. Conformity sounds like a bad word, but we conform to implicit and explicit social rules. It's pretty useful for social groups operating. If everybody here was talking and walking in and out and stuff like that, we couldn't talk, have a class, right? If we didn't conform in some ways, we couldn't do very much that took more than one person to do. And it's seen across peoples and lifespans and cultures. It's how, in certain ways, we work together as people. Now, the original experiment on this came from a very perceptual effect. Participants reported for a study on visual perception, researcher with Sharif. They were seated in a dark room and saw a point of light appear, then move, and then disappear. And they were asked to judge how far the light moved. This was based on a perceptual illusion, because if you stare at a light in a totally dark room, you'll start to interpret it moving, even though it does not physically move. It has to be a blacked out room. You have to sit there for a while, and then you start to get signals about movement that are incorrect. And this perceptual illusion that a dot is moving was called the autokinetic effect. And that's okay. You've seen amazing illusions, and that would be another amazing illusion of a single dot of light in a dark room, and you start to think it moves. But the astounding thing was this. Here's three individuals who were tested, and their rating of how much it moved. It didn't move, so there's some differences. Now the three of them are tested together on day 2, on day 3, and day 4. And you can see that these three different people start to converge on the identical imagined illusory movement, as if the responses of the others were influencing one and another on such a simple thing. And then this experiment was made even more ridiculous by one of the most spectacular experiments, just in its simplicity and power and replicability. So this is from Ash. Imagine that you walk into a room, and your task is this. Now get ready, because let me ask for a volunteer right now. Okay, thanks. Get ready. This is going to be pretty tough, okay? And everybody else will be nice to you because you volunteered, right? You see this line here? Which of these three lines has the same length? Number 1. That looks good to you? Does that look like a really tough thing? No? Okay, thanks. Okay, I was being a little facetious. All right, thank you. But you have to understand this is the gist of the experiment. Not such a tough thing, okay? Pretty obvious. Here's what they did. You were brought into a room, and there were 6 confederates. So that's the word in social psychology that's used for people who are in on the experiment, okay? They're not really subjects. So you walk into a room, you don't know what's going on. There's 6 other students sitting there, and they do exactly what we did now. They show you a line like this and 3 other lines and say, you pick it. The 6 other people go first. So you're sitting there, imagine this, and imagine the first one says 1, you go, okay. And somebody goes, 2. You go, All right. And the next person says, oh yeah, 2. And by the time they get to you, 4 of the 6 have said number 2. What do you do? Now, to an astounding extent, what you do is this. You also say 2. Okay? And it's not like you're saying, I'm just fitting in. When they show you the pictures, people are turning their head. Is there an angle? Is it the lighting thing? Why do I think it's number 1 when everybody else is pretty, for such a simple thing, pretty much? So, the Confederates are not always wrong, but they're pretty often wrong and in a consistent way. It's all a setup. But you as an individual, and here's one of these, you see this person like, okay, if I look hard enough, I'm going to figure out, how did they figure out that line number 1 equals line number 2? So if you do it by yourself, less than 1% errors. Obviously, the only error you make is if you're not paying attention, right? Okay, all right. With group pressure, not every single time, but all of a sudden, 37 times more often, you say it's the wrong line length. And almost always the impression is you really believe it. The people are really struggling. They're really hemming and hawing, okay? They're not just, and this varies, not everybody's the same, but only 25% give the correct answer throughout the experiment. 75% of people, at least once, will give the obviously wrong answer because they feel that conformity is, they need to respond to the other answers given by the other students around them. Such a simple thing as line length, we cannot help but want to fit in and figure out a way to do that. What affects this conformity? Well, the more Confederates, the more powerful it is. That makes sense, right? So here's the group size effect. So, if only one person is making it, you just figure they're not too swift, and you can get a line. 2 people, you're already moving up. By the time you get to 4 people, you're all the way up there. 4 to 15 is about the same. So 4 other people giving you obviously wrong answers. You decide there must be something interestingly going on, and you can figure it out like they did, okay? Presence of an ally. We'll come back to this a couple times. All it takes is one person to break the conformity, and you're willing to break that too. In these experiments, that's set up. The allies and one of the Confederates who's now told to give the right length. So one brave person can really change what you do, but it's hard to be that brave person. These allies are set up by the experimenter. So what happens? Here we go. Here's the mistakes being made when all the other people are saying the long length, and if one person is giving the right answers, only occasionally. Still, you do it sometimes, but a dramatic difference from one person giving the right answer. One dissenter opens up your chance to go with the answer you know intellectually is correct. Embarrassment. It's amazing the stuff we all do. It's amazing the stuff we all do to avoid being embarrassed, okay? Embarrassment is such a powerful thing for almost all of us. There's some exceptions, but for almost all of us. So part of what's going on in conformity is to not to be embarrassed, to be different. And so here's the way they show you that. They have you arrive late. You're not really arriving late. They tell you, oh, you should have been here. We had a miscommunication. All the other people are here. They knew. Okay. Well, because you arrived late, why don't you just write down your answers? You don't have to say them out loud because we can't have you mess up the experiment now. Then it's still not perfect, but people reduce by 1/3 the number of their incorrect answers, okay? Because they don't have to tell other people what they saw. Okay, it's not perfect, but all of a sudden at least that. And a few other things. It peaks in 9th grade. Women on average showed a bit more than men. Cultures that are more interdependent showed a bit more than cultures like the US that emphasize independence. But these are all variations on a relatively small thing. Fundamentally, humans want to conform, and they don't conform superficially. They convince themselves there's something going on, and then the right thing to do is to conform. Why do we conform? There's all kinds of hypotheses. We want to be right, okay? Everybody else knows that line length. I want to be right. And I want to be popular. I don't want to be the weird person not doing this stuff. So anyway, so let's come to compliance.
Okay, yeah. Jeez.
Which is even more oppositional. So you know this from your life if you have ever spent money on something you didn't mean to because there's an effective salesperson. It's called the foot in the door technique. And here's an example. Here's what they did in 1962 in California. Friedman and Fraser drove to homes, random homes, show a large, unattractive sign that says, drive carefully. And we can all agree that it's pretty non-controversial to drive carefully. And they asked the person, they knock on the door, and they ask the person, will you place this on your lawn? Now think if somebody comes up to you, knocks on the door, and says, would you place this large, unattractive sign to drive carefully? And less than 20% say yes. Okay, that's not a shocking number, right? They're picking something that's like, apple pie, right? And mom, drive carefully. Who can be against that? But still, who wants a weird sign on your lawn, right? Okay, and they made it unattractive on purpose, all right? So 20%. Here's the other group. They go up to your door, they knock on the door, and you say, I have a petition here. You've had that experience on the street or somewhere. I have a petition here. Will you sign up to support legislation to reduce traffic accidents? Okay, and you think, okay, is there some gimmick here? Who can be against? Who's for traffic accidents? The person says, yes, please. So you go, okay, I'm going to sign that one, right? So a lot of people sign that one. Then you go back to that same house a few weeks later, and you ask the sign. It moves up to over 50% say yes for the sign. That's literally the foot in the door. That once you've signed this petition, then you're incredibly more likely to say yes for the sign. And what we understand that to be, as through other experiments, we want to be consistent in our behavior. Well, gee, if we're willing to sign a petition for fewer accidents, why wouldn't we put a sign on our lawn to further promote people not getting run over, okay? All right? But once you make a small agreement, then you're willing to do something way larger that by itself you would never do. And I can't tell you from my own experience how much that when people end up doing something they really wish they hadn't done, it often starts, and you may know this in yourself, with a small thing, good or bad, okay? It seems small, and you do a little bit more, and then you do a little more, and then all of a sudden you're surrounded by a SWAT team in your dorm room, right? And you say, like, how did this happen, right? It's amazing how often things, good and bad, start with small steps, another small step, and all of a sudden, you're on a slippery slope to doing something you could never have imagined if it would have imposed as strongly as you ended up doing it. Does that make sense? Okay? So this is compliance. A little question, all of a sudden you're doing something you would never do by itself. Obedience. Now, obedience, we think, well, we're not going to be that obedient. We, to a certain extent, obey our parents, the police, our bosses, and firefighters. Again, a certain amount of obedience, I think, logically, we think is necessary for social order and civilization, so that we're all organized in some non-chaotic way. And it varies across groups and times and so on. But we know there are horrible examples where obedience is associated with genocide. The defense of many Nazis in Germany was that they were simply following orders, right? And in genocides all over the world, tragically, people say, why do they do that? Why would they end up, if you opposed it that way to people, why would you end up murdering many people, innocent people, defenseless people. So often part of it is being a
Yeah. I mean, it does work like that. Yeah, I am. I don't really stop here because it certainly I will give a proper conclusion to it. But yeah, it it simply works like what is being mentioned here. It just happens that when somebody sees that they need to justify themselves, or when you socially believe that stuff needs to follow why you already what you already did, because you know that you in some ways are already in depth with your actions themselves. You take too much responsibility for things that shouldn't be too much in your hands. In this case, what we are analyzing certainly has a lot of different ways of being interpreted, because the problem is we are only observing an example born out of somebody is willing to put or not a sign, but it does happen in every single aspect of life, and that is where the real problems start to happen. There are a lot of times where, because you associated with someone once, now you are willing to defend them against others because you believe that certainly doing so is the correct thing, because based on your previous judgments, you're already associated to this person, even if you yourself don't even realize that what you're defending is not the correct cause or anything like that. And all of those um, ideas need to be observed always, because they end up really making you, in certain ways, um, yourself at risk at the very least. And it doesn't always happen that it is the worst thing that will happen, but it just exists that you are doing things that you might not do if you were to once again not follow the whole chain of events until that point. And I don't know, I think it certainly is quite weird, because the amount of times in which somebody, for the sake of being consistent with their whole narrative, does stuff that they didn't really want to, happens throughout the life of everybody, ends up being shockingly high. But yeah, I mean, even actions like what you say, gachas or casinos that are literally the same thing, are incredibly damaging stuff. And I guess certainly you can say, trying to see it as more than just, okay, I am spending a little bit time on here, is beneficial, because you slowly don't even realize that you're building up those justifications towards things that you might very well not do if you were completely sober from your compromising, let's say. But yeah, um, understandable. I hope so. And yeah, continuing. Um,
obedient to some group. So now comes one of the all-time amazing experiments that we can't pull off, although I'm going to tell you it was pulled off in a certain way recently from Stanley Milgram. So it works like this.
the whole point in there, that here is where I wanted to talk about. Yeah. Um, so yeah, now not only from being, as it said there, uh, congruent with your whole narration, but also when you take too much, all of the aspects that were pointed out here, there there is a lot of attention that somebody pays to their outer world, and all of this ends up really making you, once again, commit actions that you might have really not wanted to. The problem is, if you're not even aware of this, once you have to reason your way out of the consequences that your own actions brought to you, you might find out that you are completely making stuff up. That's where the problem really lies. Because it isn't just a problem to, let's say, take a shot of a drink. The problem is you took a shot of a drink. You said, "Wow, I can drive." You went on your car, and while trying to get back to your house, you decided to speed up. And because you decided to speed up, you literally crashed. You know, That's where the problem really lies. Not because you decided to take one cup, but because you said, wow, I am a responsible man. I am a responsible human. I can't put anybody else at, at risk, or I can't annoy anybody else, or I can't spend any other money. And not only does it happen because you believe that you shouldn't do it, you also believe that you should pay attention to what was told to you. If somebody, or not if somebody, if consistently different people keep telling you, wow, you're such a good driver, you're more than inclined to believe such things, even if you know that it is already risky. It doesn't happen that those who crash do it completely out of nowhere. Most of those who had accidents knew that they were completely intoxicated when it happens that the drivers were intoxicated. But it is complex once again because it ends up leading to the observation of how many different things, alarms that have already sounded in your life, are you ignoring for the sake of justifying your own existence and your your own actions. That's where all of those things do get kind of nasty. And I don't think it is always that negative or that bad. It just happens that by purely trying to become aware of all these things, you end up because everybody is so immersed in this, noticing slowly to which degree they are affecting you. And obviously, this can also be good. I mean, you start to realize that sometimes you started something because you said jokingly years ago, you know what, I might dedicate my time at something like this. And now, unconsciously, maybe you never remember that you made such a joke, but you end up going back and you remember that the first time you ever talked about all of this was with a friend making a joke. And it ended up driving you to where you're standing right now. And that's where it gets useful because you changed your whole life for stuff that you really liked because you were capable of noticing that even if you were saying a joke, there was a hint of truth behind what you really enjoyed in your actions right now. So that's also the gift of being so swayed by your desires, but we only take note out of the negative parts. It is incredibly easy to do it that way after all. Not everybody has to pay attention to their own actions um, every single day, and doing so obviously is also quite tiresome. So I don't know, I think it serves quite a lot of purposes. The only problem is you require quite a lot of patience to properly watch over any of this stuff. But yeah, um, basically that at the very least. How anybody can be made take certain actions in one way or another. I guess more often than not, certainly, at the very least in this type of environments, no, we are not influenced as much by figures of power and such, but more often than not, in the rest of life, it does happen that one gets swayed because somebody more influential says, you know what, you should do this or you should do that, when it doesn't really matter, man. Or because you just said a lie, now you are fully committed to something that isn't even true. And that's quite dangerous. But anyways, I think the point was made clear at this point. So yeah, now for real, continuing. I hope so. I didn't miss anything. So yeah, continuing.
This is the actual flyer that Milgram at Yale sent out. Persons need it for a study of memory. And they'll pay you $4. At that time, that was something, okay? And he would come into Professor Stanley Milgram in the Department of Psychology at Yale University. And here was the gimmick. It was a newspaper ad like that, and you would come in, and there'd be two people in the room. One was a Confederate, and one was you, who naively, honestly, just shows up to do an experiment. They tell you they're here to help science improve learning and memory through.
Wait. Is this the test of the one who tells you the truth, or did we go over that? I completely forgot to mention that.
Punishment. We improve learning and memory through punishment. And we're going to say that one of you will randomly become the teacher and one will become the learner. And they make it look like a lottery. They sort of hand out a piece of paper, but it's all a setup. You will become the teacher. The other person will become the learner. You will become the teacher. And you get sets of word pairs to memorize. As a teacher, you give a word, and the student's supposed to give you the right answer. You have the answer in front of you, and you tell them whether they were right or wrong. If they give you the correct answer, you're supposed to say good or that's right to encourage good learning. If they give you the incorrect response, you're supposed to press a button that delivers a shock. Here is the device they used, and with every one of these buttons, the voltage goes up.
Yeah.
And you, as the teacher, sample a 45-volt shock, which I can tell you is moderately uncomfortable, okay? All right? It's not terrible, but you know it's not fun, okay? So you know that. In case you had some illusion about that, you know 45 volts is already pretty uncomfortable. So you say, that's how it feels, okay? Okay. Now the other person goes into the room, and you're sitting there as the teacher. So here's the setup. Here you are, getting your $4. Here's the scientist in a white jacket telling you what to do, the researcher. Here's the so-called learner, but that's really a Confederate, okay? They're not really getting shocked in the other room, but they're going to play act a lot. And you're sitting there in front of this device that goes from 15 to 450 volts in small steps, so 15 volts. 30 switches across here. 150 has a label that says strong shock, 255 intense, 375 danger, severe shock. At 435 and 450, there's no word left for the intensity of shock. They just put triple X, all right? Initially, the learner does well. Again, it's a setup. The learner knows what they're supposed to do. But then errors start to make. The learner starts, and with every error, you're supposed to go one worse. The learner complains that the shocks are starting to hurt as they move up to about 100. Then they scream in the other room when you give the shock. And the participants, I can tell you, they're just like you would think, just like you would do. You go like, I really don't like this. This doesn't seem right. And the person running the experiment says, your job is to do the next thing, okay? And the people are suffering and like, this can't be right. And how's this happening at Yale? So think what you would do. The learner complains about his or her condition in the other room. More errors. Now the teacher is often begging the other person, please listen and pay attention. I don't want to shock you anymore. Come on, get it together. I don't want to do it anymore. Then the person starts to scream from the other room. You have no right to keep me here. Another shock. I refuse to answer anymore. You can't hold me here. The person's shouting this from the other room. My heart is bothering me. At 300 volts, the person says they refuse to answer. You turn your head to the experimenter and you say, the person's not even answering at 300 volts. What do I do? And the scientist in the white jacket says, if there's no response, that's a wrong response. So you give another shock, okay? And at 350 volts, the person is not even responding anymore. As far as you know, they're sort of dead, okay? I mean, you don't know what they're doing, but you think something horrible has happened. This is fully play-acted, and the people who went through this were miserable, so much so that it's been almost impossible to do this ever since. People think it's too dangerous for the naive research participant who thinks they're nearly shocking somebody to death. So how many people go all the way up, and this person screaming, begging, saying their heart is starting to give out, and finally going silent? How many people go all the way up to 450, all the way up, long after the person has stopped responding, and you get these incredibly bad signs? So they asked experts, and they said it would be about 1 to 3%. That's a good way to identify psychopaths in the world, okay? And you can certainly sit there, you can say what I'm going to say, like, I would never do that. And I'm going to convince you in a minute, guaranteed in this room, most of you would do that, all the way. Guaranteed by any scientific evidence, and all of us will say, I would never do that. Power of the situation. So how many people went all the way? 2/3 went all the way. 2/3. Look at the round. Look to your left and to your right. You know, if there's 3 of you, 2 of you will go all the way. Well, until you're okay. I don't know. No, not me. Not me. Not me. So here's what experts said. Once you get to some intensity level, practically nobody's going to do it. Here's the 2/3 of people who went all the way, and even so, 2/3 went all the way, but everybody went to 100 volts. Almost nobody stopped early on. Okay, but 1/3 stopped around 1/3 through. 2/3 went all the way. So people have said, oh, that's the 1950s. People were much more conformist and obedient, okay? That was before Vietnam, before rock and roll, before Watergate, and all this stuff that's made us distrust authority, and before the internet, we know what's going on. All right. So so now, come on, you guys go like it's not us. That's some sad 1950s people who are just following instructions. We're independent people of the 21st century. So they almost redid this experiment in some reduced way a couple years ago, and it doesn't make a difference. All right. So in 2009. Here's the things they did to get approval of this. First of all, they even more carefully than before, screened the subjects to make sure they were in good mental health, they weren't breaking down people. They were told 3 times they could stop and still get $50 for participating. Okay, they were told multiple times, you can stop, you can stop, you can stop. After the experiment, they were instantly told what the whole thing was about, which wasn't that well organized before. They have a clinical psychologist sitting there to make sure that the person seems not too distressed, okay? And they said, look, since we know that pretty much everybody went to 150, went all the way, we'll stop at 150 volts. We won't torture a person all the way through. But 150 is pretty big. You're doing it for quite a bit of time. Well, so what happens in 2009? For milligrams, 79% went to 150 volts. In 2009, 70% of undergraduates go to that same length. It looks pretty much the same. And by the way, in case you thought women were more merciful or not, they're identical to men in these studies in 2009, okay? It's stunning, right? And so everybody who worries about situations in the world where people do horrible things to other people is incredibly impressed by this experiment, where so little pressure as a voluntary experiment where you can stop any time and walk out. It's not your boss, it's not a general, it's not your culture, it's not your parents and schools, just an experimenter. Almost everybody goes all the way, and that's true in 2009 as well. We're incredibly prone, if we have the right situation, to be obedient beyond what our humanitarian spirits suggest they would be.
Okay. Yeah. Also, seriously, thank you, Ace, introductions for your Barnes points. But yeah, I guess certainly it is quite shocking, after all, to take into consideration that everybody can be so cruel, because nobody will believe that we have such capacities. Like, the justifications were all given. You wouldn't see yourself as somebody so bad, but reality is quite shocking in those terms. And learning how much can somebody be influenced to do what really seems bad is shocking, because I am pretty sure we already analyzed this in one of the earlier classes. Pretty much paints an understandable picture of why so many problems happen throughout time. Because if you believe that what somebody else is saying is true, if somebody else is telling you to keep going because there is a proper justification, then you're going to do it. And once again, there is no need to mention any particular event, but there are a lot of cases in history which this exact same thing happened. And yeah, you don't need to go that much out there now to see it as, it certainly happened because they were being influenced, not because they were the worst kind of humans. No, it isn't about being the worst or being the most dangerous. It is sometimes somebody's telling you, there is no problem, keep going, and you do so. It 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 sounds. The problem is, it also sounds too methodical. It just happen out of nowhere. There are a lot of different things set up here to say that, oh well, but these people could have not done it. They were in a free environment or what? No. Once again, there were already two different tests conducted to show the same thing. And throughout time, you can see it always happening. That it is the reality that if somebody else is influencing you, your capacity to commit to what they're telling you that is worth becomes incredibly high, even if what you're doing is completely damaging to yourself. Because this is one of the few variations that there was of this test. One of the most interesting ones that I always liked is there is a version in which you get also shocked when you have to shock the other person. And although obviously you don't get as much as quote unquote shocked as the actor on the other side, you're still getting a little bit of an annoying sensation on the higher levels. So it becomes quite clear that if justification is good enough, quote unquote, it isn't even if this is good enough or not. It was already proven that there is no need for anybody to keep going. If somebody tells you, okay, keep going, you will commit to it, even if it is completely catastrophic. And I, I don't know. I have yet to see if learning about this one is useful because it truly comes down to sometimes you don't even realize that you have already committed stuff you didn't because somebody else told you, yeah, you're doing great, mate. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Continuing. Um,
So nobody really knows why we're so obedient, although I'll show you some things that people have discovered. Does the status of the authority figure matter? Does it matter that the person seems like a scientist who knows what he or she is doing? Is it belief that the source of authority, because they know what they're doing, it must be okay? How much does it matter that you can't quite figure out how to get out of this situation? And how much is a slippery slope like we talked about? Well, if I can do 5 volts, I can do 10. If I can do 10, I can do 20. If I can do 20, I can do 30. And somehow, 5 by 5, you end up at 400, okay? So these are all ideas. So people have looked at this. What if the person gives no instructions? Almost nobody does it. If the person just says, here's the experiment, please do it, and it doesn't talk with you when you say you want to stop, people stop. All they have to say, though, is, please continue, and that's enough. Men and women aren't different. If you do the experiment not in a psychology, here's the baseline, the 70% to go all the way. In an office building, it's less. Why do you think that? People's interpretation of the situations is not quite as officially scientific, right? Still, you get a lot. If the person in charge doesn't seem like they know what they're doing, particularly in a white coat, doesn't seem like an advanced scientist, it pushes way back the authority of the person. If the experimenter is more formal but away from you, so you don't see them, they're talking to you over an intercom or something, that pushes you back to do it less likely. If the victim is in the same room as you are, that reduces it, although still 40% go all the way. If you have to touch the person while the person's being shocked, that reduces it. And if you have a confederate, another person working with you on this, who rebels, that also has a huge effect. This idea, again, if there's one dissenter, that frees you sometimes to follow your own ideas and thoughts. But these one dissenters are set up. Who becomes that one dissenter? Okay. The famous Stanford prison experiment, right? Same idea, roughly speaking, and unbelievably relevant to Abu Ghraib. It's almost as if, from the viewpoint of psychologists, they had rerun the Stanford experiment, except in Iraq with real prisoners and American soldiers.
okay, yeah. If we're moving on, because well, I mean, I could touch it later on, probably. Really, yeah. I will. Yeah, I completely skipped that one, so I will prefer to. No, 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 no. Let's keep going. Yeah, I will later on go back to that. I completely forgot. I don't know what I was doing. That I completely ignored something so important because that is also quite interesting. The one of even if one person decides to rebel with you, you take action. That is quite useful to consider a little bit. But anyways, continuing. After this, I will mention that. After finishing this, I will go back to it.
But in the Stanford prison experiment, there was a social situation where they basically told people that they would be either the prisoners or the guards, Stanford undergraduates, and they would put them in the basement of their psychology building, and they would use various closets as the pretend cells. But you were assigned to be randomly a guard or a prisoner. To make it a little bit more realistic, they surprised you when they picked you up. You had signed up, okay? But they would run to your house, and the guy would grab you and say, you're coming now, and you're the prisoner, okay? So there's a little play acting in this as well. And what they found was that the guards, the Stanford students who were randomly assigned to the guards, became so sadistic. And the Stanford students who were the prisoners were so stressed that the study was stopped in 6 days. They were going to do 24 days because people were sobbing. People were doing horrible things to one another. Here's pictures of this reminds you of the Abu Ghraib, right? All lined up like that. Typical Stanford students who were dressed up and given a baton, and they were just horrible, 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 horrible. Playing the role of the prison guards, they became abusive and mean to an astounding degree. So again, this idea now, weirdly enough, the only authority here is Phil Zabard, the social psychologist, who said, like, your job is to be the guard and your job is to be the prisoner, right? So anybody could have stopped sort of at anything, but once they got playing these roles, it took them only a few hours to really occupy the life of the sadistic guard and the life of the victimized prisoner. So think of this thing in Abu Ghraib, where you had a huge number of prisoners, a very small number of American soldiers. Very few of the American soldiers had any training about how to think about being a guard. It was almost as if you had rerun the Stanford prison experiment. Add to it fear on both sides of harm that's intended by the other groups. Add to it the cultural divisions between the Americans and the Iraqis. So you really felt like the other group was another group. I mean, you knew here at Stanford in the basement that these were your other students, right? Half the room could be the guards here, half the room could be the prisoners here. Nobody has been allowed to rerun this because the behavior was so horrible so fast that you're just simply not allowed to do an experiment like that again. And here again is a picture of the guards, the students randomly chosen to be the guards, and here's one of the students randomly chosen to be the prisoner. It looks just like Abu Ghraib. It's as if the army should have heard about that experiment before that. And here's more pictures of the sort of abuse, and you can find lots of videos online about that. Okay, so I'm going to jump forward to this. So again, we could think, again, the more you know about this, how free was this person to do the right thing? And how situationally dominated were they by authority and by the situation that surrounded them? If you think about the Milgram experiment, who's your commander and in charge of you? If you think about the Zimbardo experiment, you have the job of being the prisoner of the guard, okay? And is she really a bad person, or did you put her in a hopeless situation to do a good job? So the last thing I want to talk about.
I think every single time some of those pictures are up, I skip a bit. Sorry, but I bro, scare me like that. Ah. No, yeah. Going back to the video itself, to the lesson. Yeah. So it certainly is quite interesting, and even more because as it was pointed out, literally nobody was forcing these roles, and it had to be stopped by a higher authority, somebody who knew about it but wasn't involved in the whole play that was going on. And it always is interesting because you can pretty much take into consideration this and see how it affects a lot of different places where people also play roles and where people also believe that somebody has to be the authority and such. And that's where you start to see, once again, the similarities. Out of nowhere, people becomes incredibly hard and incredibly strict and authoritarian and completely self-validating in terms of what I say is the reality and everything else is fake. And all of that is not only interesting because of what it contains, because it, once again, it is quite a shocking discovery, but also because it leads to a lot of other comprehensions. In overall, what I think it was talked about here, game theory, as in this whole way in which we should supposedly try to cooperate with one another in terms of human beings, not just video games, but rather the game of life, let's say. It shows why in a lot of actions you end up truly regarding what is the authority as somebody so important. Or if you are given the position of power, you also believe that you are so much more necessary for the whole game to keep occurring than what really is necessary. Because in these cases, it is almost impossible for anyone to not pay so much attention to what should dictate the rhythm of the whole game than literally the participants themselves. So it does give a lot of insight into why it does happen, but once again, it doesn't really show how to avoid it. Because you can pretty much still be falling prey onto such things, even if you haven't even tried to avoid it or to not get affected by it. It is still a common occurrence, and it is still an event that could very well happen to anybody. If you have no way of avoiding it, how will you, in any particular capacity, do such a thing? But anyways, my point was made so far. It is quite interesting, so yeah, continuing.
Well, let's talk about that for 1 second. Any thoughts? How would you find her? Yeah. What kind of abuse was in the prison? Well, from what one reads, and who knows how accurate exactly that is, one person did die. Not much of it was the torture of the sort of waterboarding that you hear about. It was more scaring the heck out of them and embarrassing them horribly. Taking a bunch of people, having them all be naked and piling them up, putting them on a leash. Okay, I'm sure it wasn't physically nice. It wasn't brutal in the most sense. It was more taunting and humiliating. But there was some pain involved as well. It wasn't murderous. You could say that limit. Yeah.
I mean, I know given the circumstances,
It's almost impossible. The same thing with the milligram. They redid it a little bit in 2009 with these limitations, right? The amazing thing is it looks just like, as far as they took it, just like the 1950s milligram. The Stanford experiment, yeah, people now think ethically you can't do that because not only is the behavior of the guards abysmal, but the people who were the prisoners were really depressed afterwards, were really anxious afterwards. It wasn't like stepping in and out of an experiment. As were, by the way, the milligram subjects who went all the way up. They reported being haunted by this experience for many years to come. So these kinds of things people would not do now because it's just considered too risky for the participants. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Um, I, I believe I want to stop here. That's something quite interesting because that's uh, sorry, but I mean I don't understand how can somebody be so shocked that they can be a horrible human being. It is like you really believe you couldn't do anything bad to anybody else. You know? Yeah. I I mean, there is a certain insight into understanding how much of a threat you are to literally everything, and how much of a incredibly dangerous person you can be when you want to. If you really believe that you can't in any way be negative, you might be quite wrong. Good intentions are not the only necessary thing in doing stuff or having a clear goal. It also is about balancing what you believe is good with what is really beneficial for everybody. No? Because the same thing applies here. Oh wow, I have to fulfill this role. Okay, but how much are you going to do it? How much of a punishment are you going to give to other people? It isn't that. It isn't that worth to believe that we are capable only of doing good stuff. And if we really take the role of I am I am going to do the best possible act and only to just in a completely just way act. Oh, it doesn't happen like that. It doesn't work like that. But anyways, I mean it certainly is quite a negative. I understand it after all. Nobody really wants to confront the abyss that is to become aware of your own capacity to damage others. That is also to a certain extent why we have a lot of rules against weapons and such. You don't want to really kill anybody. You are not ready mentally to kill anybody. You might believe that you are, but once you have to play, once you have to do it, that's when you become aware of how much of an incredibly horrible moment that is. That's also, at the very least, what separates those who are minimally sane from the completely irrational people who does it for the sake of feeling good. But yeah, um, once again, you feel quite bad, but at the same time, maybe way of acting wasn't that good to begin with. Anyways, I don't know. I don't know. It is funny to me.
And for people, like the students that were participating in it, did they go on to live like normal?
What's the long-term damage? That's a very good question. I don't know if they've been followed up. That's a very good question. I know for months, the people, especially with the prisoners, said they felt very, very, very bad. But I don't know, I don't know if decades later they followed them up or not. That would be an interesting question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just in case, it was more than famous this case, and I have seen quite some videos on that. There are some of the participants are still traumatized nowadays because it was true that somebody died. It was true that somebody lost their lives because of a test. So yeah, it was quite damaging on the longer run. Let's say it like that. But yeah, and once again, nobody wants to really become aware of how harmful we can be with our actions, with our words, with whatever. So yeah, anyways.
If someone's more knowledgeable in psychology, or they way more or less? Like, for algorithm, if they have been trained more in psychology? Yes, it's not so much psychology, I'd say. You know, I'm going to give you my impression, because I don't have a good answer. It's if you get the right kind of training so you're prepared for a situation, you have a much better chance. So remember earlier we talked about, now it seems very academic compared to these experiments, we talked about cognitive busyness, that if your mind is not free to evaluate the situation, you interpret in terms of disposition. So if you're, you know, what does that mean? In a scary, complicated situation, we go by our guts, okay? And our guts are, you know, the other person's different. I'm in charge of them as the guard, right? If we're trained so that we have a second habit we can fall back on, then we have a better chance of doing the right thing when the situation arises. This is a general point. But yeah, just sending in people kind of unprepared. It's not that they have to know psychology. It's that they have to be told again and again and again, when you're the guard, keep in mind that it's so easy to be abusive. It's so easy to be humiliating that you have to guard against that in yourself. Does that seem okay? Yeah, so it's training, we think, is it's not the intellectual knowledge, it's practicing so that when the moment arises, you're ready, is I think what people believe is the right thing. Okay.
Yeah. That's a good point after all. Certainly it is necessary for anybody to be rationally not just trying, as it was said here, rationally prepared to deal with such things, because it is also part of the proper learning act to become, once again, become aware of different problems that you might have, the process of dealing with such actions. Once again, sometimes you don't even realize the extent to which you could inflict anything, be it, in this case, we're only talking about negative effects, but there is also the incredibly good side of learning how much of a helpful thing you can be for others. If you really become aware of that, and if you can really harness that knowledge, that is when you become more capable of playing the role that is being given to you, because it is in the comprehension of what you need to do that you get to fully move without breaking the boundaries of what you know are the limits. If you don't even understand what the limits are and where are the most obscure or most precious type of consequences, you might not be capable of acting and realizing really where is it that you need to stop, let's say, because certainly in these cases we're only talking about tests that were conducted with different type of observers placed around so that nothing really ended up going that badly. And even in this case, we're talking about the Stanford prison experiment, which still had one death. And how much was it? I think it was 80% of the participants traumatized, and none of that still went wrong. It needs more preparation. All of these things end up being just literally another way to talk about life itself. Because if all of these things are conducted without anybody being ready for them to happen, you're not going to find the results that you want. Even less if you don't even understand what you're doing. But I don't know. That goes a little bit more than what was the question itself. So yeah, comprehension basically, comprehension, proper preparation itself. All of those things are quite necessary for anybody.
The last thing I want to talk about, a couple of things, is bystanders and helping. And these are just amazing experiments. And in many ways, they're all about embarrassment and how embarrassment makes us incredibly less helpful and kind to others than we can imagine. So the most famous case that began a lot of this research was the murder in New York City of Kitty Genovese. And I'm going to read to you just a minute about her murder. It got a fantastic amount of newspaper coverage. And this was the walk home she had to her apartment. So at approximately 3:20 in the morning of March 13, 1964, 28-year-old Catherine Genovese was returning to her home in a nice middle-class area of Queens from her job as a bar manager. She parked her red Fiat at a nearby parking lot, turned off the lights, and started to walk to her second-floor apartment some 35 yards away. She got as far as a street light when a man grabbed her. She screamed. Lights went on in a 10-floor apartment building nearby, so a lot of people. She yelled, "Oh my God, he stabbed me. Please help me." Windows opened in the apartment building and a man's voice shouted, "Let that girl alone." The attacker looked up, shrugged, and walked off down the street. Ms. Genovese struggled to her feet. Lights went back off in the apartment. The attacker comes immediately back and stabs her again. She again cries out, "I'm dying, I'm dying." Again, the lights come on and the windows open in many of the nearby apartments. The assailant again left and got into his car and drove away. She staggers to her feet as a city bus drives by. It's 3:30 in the morning now. The attacker returns again. He finds her in the doorway at the foot of the stairs, and he stabs her a third time, this time with a fatal consequence. It's 3:50, okay? Half an hour when the police received the first call. They responded quickly, and within 2 minutes, they were at the scene. She was already dead. The only person, well, the one person to call was a neighbor who revealed that he had phoned only after much thought and an earlier phone call to a friend. So he doesn't call the police. He calls a friend and says, I wonder what I should do here, right? And he said, I didn't want to get involved. Later it was learned that there were 37 other witnesses to the stalking and stabbing over the half-hour period. Why did no one offer any help or call the police? The story in question were front-page news across the country. Urban and moral decay, apathy, indifference were some of the many offered explanations. This was one of these cases that people...
You're familiar? What? You're familiar? You know about it? Ah, yeah. It was in New York City, yeah. 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 I thought, I mean, problems of different languages, yeah. But I, I got for a second like, what? He's a familiar, what? But no, yeah, understandable. But yeah, I mean, I think it could pretty much be quite a useful lesson because after all, it also gives you insight on what ends up being the responsibility and sometimes not overthinking as, wow, so many people did take action. Because that is also, I don't know if that is the conclusion they are going to have here. I also heard about it before. One of the many problems was from the different 37 witnesses, it happened that half of them believed the others already took action, and the other half didn't care because with the same thing, they completely believe it was fully solved because so many people was acting, and it is quite another useful insight onto this whole thing of I I have a responsibility to fulfill. Somebody else did or didn't. I shouldn't care so much. I have my side to do. But yeah, let's see if I am correct.
Said this shows you how bad off we are, especially in cities where people just don't care about other people. Okay, they won't make a phone call to the police except one person hemming and hawing his way for half an hour. So the lack of the bystanders helping this woman, is it because people are selfish? Nowadays, you can bet you'd have a video of that on YouTube, right? There were questions that was, what about the rest of it? And I mean, my life, fear of getting hurt. What would you have done? Now, let me tell you, you'll see the punchline in a moment is the more people are around who could help, the more certain you are that nobody's going to help. The last thing you want to get help is a bunch of people, okay? The best chance you have is one person. Counterintuitively and against the math of multiple people. So here we go. So the most famous studies, and I'll show you about 3 of them, because they're just amazing, about how we won't help people because if we're not sure what the right thing to do is and there's other people there, it's too embarrassing to do the most obvious humanitarian gesture. So they talked about, did a series of experiments, most of them around Princeton, looking at ideas about pluralistic ignorance. Let's say each witness is uncertain whether there's a real emergency. They look around at the others not reacting. This is probably part of the story, decide it must not be a real emergency. Social evaluation of others, what are they doing? Diffusion of responsibility. Each person felt that somebody else is going to get help. So these are parts of the story, but here's the experiments. You arrive for an experiment to discuss personal problems. You signed up, you're a Princeton undergraduate, you show up. There's 1 to 4 people put in different rooms over intercoms. So it's one person, sometimes alone, or two different intercoms. One person, the Confederate, over the intercom, dramatically enacts a person having a seizure. All right, so imagine you're a student, and one of these people, who you believe is randomly another student, starts to say, I think I need somebody here, dramatically, I can't do it well enough, because I got one of the seizures coming on, I could really use some help, if somebody could help me, choking sounds, I'm gonna die, choking sound, the intercom goes quiet. What do you do? Well, if there's 2 of you, about 80% of the time, you're gonna do something. If there's 6 of you, only 30% of the time will anybody do anything. Yeah.
Sometimes it's also like people can be really selfish. Like I heard recently in a Johns Hopkins examination, like this was just a few months ago, somebody started having a seizure in the middle of the exam, and not a single person stopped their test to help them, neither did the TA.
So you're saying people can be really selfish because at Johns Hopkins, they had an exam and somebody started having a seizure, and neither the students nor the teaching assistants did anything to help the person for a long time. Okay, so you're going to call it selfish, and I'm going to agree in some sense that's true, but I'm going to tell you it's amazing. I didn't hear about the story. It's exactly this thing. Everything, and I'll show you three more examples. Every experiment shows that if it's just you and one person, you're incredibly more likely to help that person than if it's you among 5 people or 10 people. The more people, the more certain you are to do nothing. And I'm going to tell you in a moment, this is an amazing example, why the exam matters too. Okay? Because these experiments will show you that this is deeply human, unfortunately. Okay? Deeply human. And it's not that I think it's not that we're more selfish, it's that we're terrible at knowing, this is a question about this, we're terrible at knowing what to do under unusual circumstances, and we're overcome by wanting to fit in. So you look at that person, they're not doing anything, they look at you, you're not doing anything, they look at that person, and you guys you're having a face-off of not doing anything while the person's sort of, sinking into their seizure, okay? And you could think it's all about selfishness and not helping, but we think it's something weirdly about humans that in groups, they don't know how to act if it's unusual. They just don't know how to do it. But by themselves, incredibly more likely to help. So here's an example. I'll show you a couple more. Where's my hand? Yeah.
Is this showing
This is the percentage of participants who help. So are you guessing the math? Are you still better off?
is this like the percentage of the time that the person received help?
Yes, this is a percentage of help. You're right that you're still better off with 6, but I'll show you that very often it doesn't play out that way. Okay, but you're right. You have to do, there's a trade-off between the sheer number of people and the likelihood per person. You're absolutely right. That varies a little bit. Here's another one called Lady in Distress.
Okay. I think it won't be here, so let's tell you. Because there is this thing that is quite what was mentioned earlier, the diffusion of responsibility. It also happens that one of the few reasons as to why nobody acts, and even more when there is so many people, is because certainly you truly believe that when somebody is going to take action, they are going to do it properly. And because you believe that it is necessary for the one to take action to do it properly, you also start now to overthink your way of doing stuff as something that could somehow justify that you are not going to have the proper capacities to do it, okay? And not going to make the right call or to do it in any way that makes sense. So it isn't that you leave responsibility to others, it is that you self-disable yourself in that sense, and you auto-incapacitate out of your own hands the skill to do it or the will to do it, because you are in a group of so many people, attribute to your own existence less importance than what it has. And in these cases, obviously, less chances at being capable of dealing with the problem at hand than what is really the reality itself. So it isn't as wow, nobody takes action because there is too many people. There are different reasons, but understandable so far.
A subject walks alone or with a passive confederate, so the confederate is set up to do nothing, or with a friend, a real friend. You come as a pair. And you go into a room that's separated by a curtain. The experimenter goes to the other room. In this case, they made it a woman at the time. Turns on a tape recording of a huge fall, much bigger than that. Boom, okay? She's around a curtain, okay? And she starts moaning, a pre-recorded painful moan. You're sitting on the other side of the curtain. Who gets up to go see what happened to the experimenter who sounds like they had a huge fall and are moaning with pain? This is very much like the example you said almost, right? Okay. What do the people do? Okay, so here's what happens. If you're by yourself, 70% chance you'll go there. You could wonder what's happening to the other 30%, but okay, that's still, okay. If the other person sits there who's set up to not do anything, practically nobody ever goes and helps. Because you're sitting there and the other person's not doing it and you're going, I don't know, it's kind of a weird situation. Am I invading a person's privacy? Maybe that wasn't what I thought it was, because the other person doesn't seem to be doing anything because they're set up. If there's two people who are naive, you're somewhere in between, okay? If you come with a friend, somewhere in between. But here's the weird thing. The more people, the more you're kind of trying to figure out what's the right thing to do. And you're not doing anything, so I'm not going to do anything. The other person's saying, does that make sense? Okay. Every one of these, the more people there are, the more people don't know what to do, and they do nothing. Because they don't want to do something weird and embarrassing, like make trouble or not do what you're supposed to do. Here's another one. Where there's smoke, there's fire. Subjects filling out survey. Smoke enters through a vent. Alone, you're doing this survey alone in a group of 3 or with 2 confederates who notice but ignore the smoke. or a friend you bring with you. So who leaves the room within 6 minutes to go get help when smoke is billowing into your room? Okay, all right? Now, you could say, as you sit there again, this is like the Milgram experiment, you go, well, of course I would do it, but amazingly, people are sitting there trying to figure out, like, should I finish this first? Should I, is this really a fire? What's going on here? Alone, 75% of people get up within 6 minutes and go tell somebody there's smoke billowing into here. And with two passive confederates, so people have to do nothing, only 10% of the time does the individual get up and go tell anybody. You look around, the other two people are doing anything, you figure, well, that must be the right thing to do. Two naive subjects, then, now that we're doing the math this way, 12% by individuals, so a third of the groups approximately do something. Okay, that's still pretty low, okay? But if you go, interestingly, in with a friend, that number goes up, a person you really know and trust, because the interpretation is if it's somebody you know, you're not going to be embarrassed. You can say to that person, well, this is a little wacky, but shouldn't we go tell somebody there's smoke here? Or somebody collapsed next door? And the friend goes, yeah, it's probably a good idea, I don't know, but maybe we should do that, right? But if you don't know the person, you're not going to have that conversation. So a friend is very powerful to release you from this. But if you don't know the other people, yeah.
Family member, like if you ruin your child.
I don't know that they've done this. So these are usually done with undergraduates, so you just bring your roommate or a pal, okay? Yeah, I don't know if it matters at other levels. So that's a very good question. Maybe people have looked at that. I just don't know. This is the last experiment, okay? And this is kind of the topper of all of this. And this gets back to being in an exam situation. I'm glad you brought it up because this is almost an ironic experiment in a deepest sense. It's, again, Darley at Princeton. The Good Samaritan. So what's the story of the Good Samaritan from the Bible? For those of you, yeah.
There's this guy who's dying of like thirst.
Somebody really injured on the side of the road, right?
And a bunch of people go by 1% time. First, the person goes by, doesn't do anything. Second person doesn't do anything. Third person, the Samaritan.
He's from Samaria.
Right.
Okay, I'm just telling you that's. Yeah, no, I see. Yeah.
The third guy looks down at the injured man and he helps him out.
Yeah. Now I'm going to tell you one more thing, and which is Sumerians were not the most affluent members of society at the time. This matters for the story in a way you're about to hear, okay? So, Good Samaritan. So they took students, now think about this. This is because they want to show you how absurdly weird it is when it is we're willing to step forward and help a person. And I don't think it's about goodness, it's about the weirdness of our minds and not embarrassing ourselves. And how preoccupied we are with our other business, okay? So social psychologists are going to tell you the reason the Good Samaritan stopped was not because he was such a good guy, it's because he didn't have so much to do. Okay? And here's the experiment they're going to tell you why, okay? So these are students, these are seminary students studying to become ministers, okay? So this is the group. They pick this group because they want to show you, social psychologists get irritated by personality psychologists. They say, can you pick a nicer group than people studying to be ministers, okay? That's the disposition, okay? And they're filling out surveys about religious values in a room. They're told that they're going to have to present a talk about either seminary jobs or, so this is careerism, or a sermon on the Good Samaritan. That's one, okay? So you're sitting there going, help people, help people, help people, help people, because that's, okay, all right? That's their speech, they're prepared, okay? Then they're released to go give this talk in front of other faculty members and their students, so they want to do a good job. Either they're sent to the building across the campus ahead of time, plenty of time, on time, or they're late. They go, oh my gosh, you didn't go over? We told you should be, oh, you're gonna be, if you don't run, you're gonna be late, okay? You don't wanna be late to give your practice sermon or speech to the faculty committee waiting for you, right? Now, and here's one more thing to keep in mind. Some of you probably have visited Princeton, New Jersey, just to give you a sense of this. This is even back in the 1960s, but even now, so who's been to Princeton, New Jersey, Princeton University? You have, okay. Scary, urban environment full of threatening noises. The campus itself. Pastoral place full of eating clubs and references to F. Scott Fitzgerald. I'm just adding in that Princeton is a pretty non-threatening place, the campus itself. Okay? I'm just adding this in, because you got to keep this in. Okay. Here's the Confederate. It's a man slumped in a doorway, moaning in obvious pain, hunched over on the ground, going, okay, now on the path to giving the speech. Who stops to help? Anything that could measure about the personality of these individuals made no difference, whether you stop to help. Whether you are saying, stop to help, stop to help, stop to help, because you're going to give a talk about the Good Samaritan, or going to talk about career paths, okay? Doesn't make any difference at all. So amazingly, the people zooming by this injured person are saying, stop and help the person, stop it. You know, the guy's moaning in the doorway next to them, as they're walking, sorry, he's next to them. Okay, what counts as to who stops? They're by themselves, so it's not a group thing now, they're by themselves, right? It's if they're ahead of time. If they have time because they know they could stop and help somebody and still make their talk on time, 63% stop. 45% if it's going to be a close call. 10% if they're rushing because they're going to be late. Okay? This is, so they're taking the exam. It's the description you set up. a big group of people taking an exam, they're like this, like they're pressured, okay? And there's a lot of us. Somebody's going to take care of this if they need to, and I've got things to do, like take an exam, or run over and explain how incredibly important it is morally to help those who are injured and around you, right? So you can't have a more sort of a literary experiment showing you how weird it is when we stop and help people. Yeah?
On campus, I was walking back to one of the dorms, and I walked by and I saw feet sticking out of a bush, like someone had collapsed into a bush. I didn't quite believe it at first, so I stopped the next person and asked, are there feet there? Is that actually what I'm seeing? So eventually we called the police, but the response from most of the people going by, one was, I'm sorry, I can't stop, I'm late for midso, I have to go pee set and all that. So a lot of people just went by and they saw.
Okay, so you're giving a story in real life on the campus here? Where 2 feet were sticking out from a bush? All right, no, this is amazing. This is not a setup, okay? You're not a Confederate. Yeah. So first you wanted to ask somebody else, but this is really interesting. I mean, yeah, because that's the first thing, right? Like, yeah, what do you think? Good idea to have a body here? Bad idea to have a body here? And another person walks by and say, we like your opinion before we do anything. And the person says, I can't stop. I have things to do, right? I have homework. Yeah, it's astounding. So I'll just stop at saying it makes you think. You use the word selfish, and that, no, I don't mean to pick on you. But it's just weird how humans are like this. You see this all the time. For me personally, the fundamental attribute, all of these things have really changed how I interpret situations, and how much I think a person's a crummy person. Because up until the fundamental attribution error, although I always gave myself every break for doing everything wrong, okay, I always interpreted other people's failings as like deep character flaws, right? And it has made me, personally stop and think. If somebody is not doing something I wish they did or that I think would be better, maybe from their perspective, they're in a situation that's compelling them to perform less well than I think they should, or something like that. So these are unbelievably fascinating things and very convincing. And it's very sad, when they set up prisons not remembering these lessons that are so clear-cut. And I think the huge thing to know about this, as far as we possibly understand, this is true of everybody, all of us. None of us think we would do this. All of us are prone to do this through many, many, many experiments without any evidence to the contrary. From a scientific viewpoint, it's about as convincing a story as you can possibly have. All right, thanks very much.
Yeah. So yeah, certainly. I think the conclusion was quite good. Certainly, it is almost an unknown consequence, even if you know, because the problem is once you are there, you believe that things could go differently for you. But still, it is quite good, and it is quite interesting to take all of that. Because once again, it can also help you understand what are others' perspective on life. Because you out of nowhere believe that everybody is bad, or that everybody is, let's say, somebody who sees you with hatred because they are not acting on something that you need help on, when back to this, reality ends up being sometimes we are not that capable of putting ourselves out there. Sometimes we don't even have the time, as it was shown here. But I think what lacked here, I hope it is talk about it the next one, is still there is a human side to all of this, in which you can pretty much show that certainly, despite it being quite sad, quite negative, quite lacking in terms of we can't fully project ourselves onto others, you can still see some solutions, and you can still set up proper ways to deal with negative aspects of life itself. But still, I said that I wanted to talk about it, so give me a second, because I think it is even more important than what is being talked about right now, about the nature of humans in general, because that is pertaining reality itself of every single one. So let me search for that. I don't even remember what it was. But, was it literally here? No, right? Is it? There was. I think it is this one around here. It is this one. Okay, there it is. Yeah, this graph, this particular image, this particular gimmick explanation.
15 is about the same. So 4 other people giving you obviously wrong answers. You decide there must be something interestingly going on, and you can figure it out like they did, okay?
Okay, yeah, just in case, a quick rundown on what we are watching, if it isn't remembered yet. This is about people, and when somebody gives you, not somebody, a group of people gives you wrong answers on something that should be very obvious. which one is the correct one. The example was where is it? Or where is it? Here. The example is this tiny thing over here, where it is the line in the left. It is the correct answer, and which one is it? Out of the three ones on the right, obviously, people are going to tell you in a group of Confederates what they are going to go against what is the standard. They are going to tell you something wrong, and it is shown here. Certainly, there is a big increase on how much you are prone to saying something wrong when you are in a group of people. But now, what matters is
Presence of an ally. We'll come back to this a couple times. All it takes is one person to break the conformity, and you're willing to break that too. In these
that is what I wanted to talk about, and I believe it was going to be properly mentioned. That's why I have my excuse there. Eh, anyways, yeah, that is one beautiful idea because it can, as I said before, it applies to every single situation. Literally, sometimes what you need is one human to tell you that it's worth it. Going against what you believe is a problem. Going against what you realize is an annoying thing. That is the beautiful of this lesson. That is the point of all of this. That you can realize how incredibly worth it can become when somebody else shares what you think. And that's why it is necessary, I believe so, to be more out there, because sometimes we have ideas that nobody can even understand, that nobody can even picture of what we see in our minds. But if we were to try and take out what we have inside of us, mention them to others, and let them digest what we are telling, maybe then it will become more understandable. Maybe then it will make sense to help somebody on their problems. Maybe then is that we wouldn't be so alone against the problems of the world or whatever else. This is yet again useful, but it needs for you sometimes to take this step, because that is also when it happens that you stop being alone. This horrible fight against the hardships of the world, or because when you learn of how much of a useful thing it ends up being, or one to say no, this is wrong, it is also that you realize maybe you can start being the one who says no sometimes. You never know who's going to, you know, is willing to say yes to what you're postulating. You never know. Yeah. Now for real, I wanted to go back to that. So yeah, anyways. Ah, damn. That is the whole lesson there. Anyways, nice. I think I didn't. Not that I think. I know I didn't forget anything else. No, wait. That's what I forgot. Give me my clock sound. But yeah, that was quite a beautiful thing to watch. Ah, I thought I was going to fall asleep, but at some point I even felt incredibly tired even. So I don't know how that did not happen. But yeah, um, it was quite nice, and also by Spike or Spikeage. But yeah, I also love you. I hope you have Sagna. Ah, yeah, it was quite nice, quite enjoyable. And yeah, I am satisfied. I am more than satisfied. I I think with this I can say that I can go to sleep with a smile on my face. I and I am happy that you like clock sound. I certainly find it I don't know, more than good in terms of filling up the void that is not having anything playing in the background while I talk. But yeah, that's been all that we can learn about today. I am willing to talk I feel like it was quite crazy, quite quite interesting. So yeah, um, are we supposed to raise someone? I guess I should try to raise someone. No? So yeah. Anyways, as always, in the meanwhile, thanks for being here. It has been yet another productive night for me. Pretty good. We will see what ends up being the next tomorrow, I guess. Um, Stream. I don't really have any particular idea or anything of that sort. So yeah, we will we will observe later. So far, this is more than enough. This is more than sufficient in terms of happiness. So yeah, oh my god, no, I love choice paralysis. I love why is why are we so many humans all alive at the same time? Why do I have to pain us? Anyways, I think I have a one. I think so. So yeah, anyways, as I said before, thanks. It has been a pleasure. We will see whatever ends up happening next one. But so far, I think we serve to raid. Yes, we are done today. Um, and well, sorry. As always, also, thanks for being here, thanks for watching, thanks for lurking, thanks for watching the VOD. It's been a pleasure. Remember to take care of yourself. Remember to stay hydrated. Remember to stay nice, happy, to do anything that you need to do to keep being happy also, because that is important. And well, whenever we can, we're getting back here. And if we don't, at the very least, we had a great time today. So yeah. Anyways, the most important thing right now is we are raiding. We are going into Kotaru, who is what is Kotaru doing? Yeah, Kotaru is doing art. I so yeah, that's more than sufficient for us to know. We're going to complex doing it. Yeah, as always, for all people. And as Ace says, certainly, it is important to be happy. Please be happy a little bit more. It will make you better. But yeah, yeah. When we get there, we're asking him what is his complex, my brother. Now, raid.